account. Click here to reconnect. Sorry, friends, please bear with me. I just owe this to the wider audience. Okay, it looks like it's yes. It looks like we're going live now. Boom. Let me just double check on Facebook. I'm getting quite good at this, actually. I don't even need a technical director anymore. Fascinating. Okay, are we on? Yes, we are. Boy, good stuff. Next up, see, I can see my producer in the green room. She's grinning ear to ear. She's very proud of me as well. Okay, next up, where is Jane Evershed Christie? Is she not supposed to be with us? I'll bring you in. I can't hear you, girl. You have to unmute your microphone.
Yeah, she's coming straight after. She's waiting to come on.
Oh, well, bring her in now. I wanted to just give her a quick hi. I'm going to ramble for a minute or two, see if you can bring her in now. If not, certainly what I can tell you guys is that she's going to be joining us at the end of this. This is the segment that I'm really excited about. Look, it looks like I've got a halo. This is a first, as I understand it. This is a debut. This is the first time ever that we're releasing this information, unmasking, disclosing this information. And it's off the back of research work that Jane Evershed has done. As I said in my media drop earlier today, I do not take credit, but I take as much glory as I can claw from this because it's really, really exciting. I can see the numbers are jumping up here, which is really good news. And I'll speak for a minute or two, a few hundred people coming on. That's great. We're about to, I believe, and remember this day, 28th of January, 5:38 p.m. Yucatan time, we're about to disclose something quite remarkable, which is that the Renaissance, the entirety of the Enlightenment, the Renaissance appears to have been a systemic software download, a Psyop. A Psyop. For those millions of people out there, and I know I've got hundreds of thousands who are going to be seeing this, most of you in my audience will know that corrected history has increasingly become the critical focus. What the fuck happened in our history with the fall of Grand Tartaria and the mud floods and the great exhibitions and electrification and all of that? Nikola Tesla. Who was Tesla? Tesla was almost certainly the last of the strain of the Tartarians, of the Grand Tartarians, of that lineage who were bringing the old, real golden age, trying to thread the golden age information through memory banks into the modern era. Of course, the Sabbatean, Saturnian, satanic element, interventionism through Catholic Church, crowns of Europe, and then the banker-priest complex, which has really run amok for the last 500 years or so, for sure. But we can go back to 323, 325 AD with the Council of Nicaea and the conscious weaponization of Christianity at that time. That was big stuff. Don't worry about the dog in the background. It's fine, as long as it doesn't bite my ankle. That was, in a sense, the dividing line, I think, the weaponization of Christianity. That's not to say that Christianity is not a psyop, because the Luciferic or false light adulation, the false light worship, the idolatry element of religion, all religions, cult of Osiris, Buddhism with Siddhartha Buddha, Mohammedanism, Christianity. I could name probably 20 of the religious myths which all correspond and correlate. They're the same mythos. We all know this, okay, connected to the numbers 12 and 13 and all the rest of it. But something happened in our relatively modern echo of history, which was to go back 400 or 500 years ago to the Renaissance. And courtesy of Jane Evershed, you may remember I did a number of films with her about a year ago. We were doing a number of corrected history shows, but we were doing it for a TV network. So I'm not sure if they made it onto social media, broad social media. We discovered a lot of things at that time. And I don't claim to be any great sage in this area of this discipline of research and focus, just that it's something which I know is critical. It is now seminal to our emancipation, to our being able to excise ourselves from the proverbial matrix. Once we get this piece of how history has been orchestrated. It's all part of a monstrous psyop, sort of mindfuckery at an epochal civilizational level. That much is for sure. Alien intervention, genetic interventionism, all the way up to Fauciism and the objective of public health administrators all around the world, and 170 plus privately owned corporation governments that govern the dictates and the statutes and the laws and the executive and the judicial branches of government, and are trying through monstrous orchestration of possibly unwitting conspiracy on the part of most bureaucrats and technocrats, because they're just morons, mostly, not all of you, most of you. But there is a conspiracy, a monumental conspiracy and collusion to, again, systemically contaminate. What's going on? I'm seeing people in my frame again. To contaminate and weaponize our air, our water, our soil, which is to say the human body. As Dr. Klinghardt points out to us, that great sage of our era, a man who was very much in the vein of Rudolf Steiner and the great sages of history. As he points out to us, glyphosates in the soil and the food supply, courtesy Monsanto, fluoridization of the water supply, municipal water supplies all around the world, which have saturated now into the primary water bed, contaminating rivers and oceans alike. Remember, homeopathy, how that works, you put one drop in, boom, it creates some kind of fantastical lipid transfer phenomenon, and the whole body picks up the medicine through one little microdose. We all know the science of that. Same shit. When you've pumped in millions of gallons of fluoridated municipal water, pump them into the oceans, through the rivers, think about what happens. We're talking about wholesale, monstrous, synthetic molecular intervention of water, soil, and air. The living air biome, the living water biome, the living soil biome. That is what makes up and composites the human being. Okay, the carbon and silica is part of it, but we are now weaponized. The glyphosates, the aluminium, raining down on us through the engineering. You heard Alana Freeland early on. Fluoride, glyphosate, aluminium, or aluminum if you're American. That trifecta of synthetic molecules moves into the human chemistry, creates 6 different chemical reactions and responses, which ultimately make their way up to the pineal. Lock and load you as a ticking time bomb. With the activation of the electrification through electromagnetic frequency intervention, 5G, Skynet, Dragnet, when that goes live globally, courtesy of, again, this is where the Elon Musk question comes in. Who he of the X thousand satellites in the ethers? Wonderful guy on the one hand saying amazing things and anti-establishment, buying up Twitter. I'd love to ask him, what the fuck are you thinking about? Weaponizing the planet through Skynet and then the Neuralink. We've all been weaponized anyway. We're all walking antenna. Billions and billions of particulates, nanoparticulates of heavy metals in all of our bodies. We are walking antenna. We're at that point where we can have information dialed into our bodies. V2K technology is real, voice to skull technology. I have personally sat through countless testimonies in the International Tribunal for Natural Justice with military veterans, all sorts, scientists, all sorts of people who have told us about this cacophony of evil. V2K, they're already able to dial in the voice of God to people's skulls, okay? So you want to have a mass holy war, you just dial into the footprint over the Gulf, over the Levant and North Africa to the kind of humdrum Mohammedans and Muslims, and you just put the voice of God in them saying holy war, get to it. What do you think is going to happen? Same thing with Christian zealots throughout Midwest America. And you know you're my favorite people in the world. But that idolatry of the Christed peoples, too many of you are not Christians. You do not understand the message of Christ. You understand the message of fucking priests, the interventionists, the Catholic Church. That's the problem. We are on the threshold of being completely overridden by this Saturnian, satanic, Luciferic dragnet, which will go live with 5G. I spoke about this in 2017, 2018, after I was poisoned by early test bedding of that technology. Some of you know my story. I won't go into it here. I made the film 5G Apocalypse, The Extinction Event. Great powers went to some considerable lengths to take me down. Certainly came close to it. I'm not going to go into that here. Their day of judgment's coming. Their day of judgment is coming. They know who they are. Very powerful agencies and entities. Point I'm making, friends, is we are on the threshold of something quite remarkable, and it's down to us to cohere now. And the focus must come into play. It must come into phase conjugation. Living soil, living being, and the dielectric universe, the living ethers. And we are the technology. You and I are the technology. Don't forget, what did Ilana Freeland say? She referenced Rudolf Steiner. She said, the human being is the religion of the gods. What a powerful statement coming from Steiner, who was a great emissary of God, a great son of God in our age. The human being is the religion of the gods. This is so true. That's you and me, baby. Alpha, Omega. Own it. Step back from government. Step back from the Catholic Church. Step back from religious idolatry and start to cohere. How we're going to help you do it is by correcting the historical narrative. Billions of human beings have been miseducated, misinformed, mind-fucked into thinking that the Renaissance was the Enlightenment. And our classical literature and academia all references that era as being the great era, the great golden age. No, it was not. Oh, balls. I've just seen Jane Evershed disappear out of the green room just as I was about to press the button and bring her on, having led to this bugger. Okay, well, she's going to be joining us in any event. You're invited as the audience, and I can see there's a very big audience now, which I'm delighted about. You're invited to watch this next piece. It was prepared earlier. It's a slideshow. It's going to show you the evidence or the evidentiary trail of how and why the Enlightenment era, the Renaissance, was a psyop. The Babylonian priests installed it. And that was very much a part of why we had the spine broken of our true psycho-civilizational, psycho-cultural remit. That's why we are all kind of caught up in this flux from having been disconnected pre-birth from the typhonic state of consciousness, cast adrift into this abyss, into this world, all of us just trying to find our way back to self, the capitalized self, not the diminished self, the one that the government gives you on a fucking treasury bond or a birth bond or a registered piece of paper. Talking about the capitalized self, the one that connects you directly to Atman. So look, watch this, formulate questions. Jane and I are going to stick around after this live, and we're going to answer as many questions as we realistically can. Bear in mind, I have been broadcasting now for nearly 6 hours straight, or 5 hours straight, something like that. I can't remember. Anyway, folks, I'm going to retrieve now the media drop. Stand by, watch this, formulate your questions. We'll be watching the chat here, and my devoted team are all pens poised in multiple continents, I have to say right now. We've got, I think, team members on 3 or 4 continents, all pens poised to read your questions and deliver unto me the best of them. So stand by, video file being called up. Take it away.
Well, Lazarus members, very happy to be joining a remarkable friend of mine, a remarkable mind and heart, Jane Evershed, who's no stranger to the Lazarus archive. Now, curious thing here, Jane and I both began well over a year ago doing a sort of parallel dive into, actually about a year and a half ago, into corrected history, into all of that stuff, which is fast becoming one of the more important areas of focus as it relates to truth and disclosure, revelation, and the tribulation that we're going through as a planet and as a species. As I've gone to great pains to explain to my audience for the last few years, really correcting the historical narrative becomes seminal to the activation of consciousness at the individuated level, much less the morphogenetic level, which of course is what we're aiming toward. We're talking about being able to awaken fully from this dream spell and activate the mechanics of ascension, and resurrect ourselves individually and collectively. The telling of the story becomes very, very important. So one of the most axiomatic points in the informed history is, of course, the Renaissance, also to some extent referred to as the Enlightenment. And that's the piece that Jane has been focusing on lately. And I believe, and she believes, that there's some real breakthrough revelation here in her focus. So in the first instance, before I wheeze on into the dictionary definition of Renaissance, Jane, great to see you, darling girl. Welcome.
It's wonderful to be here, Sacha.
So let me just look at the dictionary definition. Renaissance, otherwise known as the rebirth period in European civilization immediately following the Middle Ages, and conventionally held to have been characterized by a surge of interest in classical scholarship and values. The Renaissance also witnessed the discovery and exploration of new continents, the substitution of the Copernican for the Ptolemaic system of astronomy, and the decline of the feudal system, i.e., a move toward centralization away from agrarian rural communities back to the citadel, to the Babylonian cityscape. All roads lead to Rome, all of that stuff. So the decline of the feudal system becomes an integral component, and the growth of commerce, okay, really important. Mercantile, Phoenician, commerce, exchange, collateralization, securitization, monetization, okay, of living systems, really important, the mercantile element. So the growth of commerce and the invention or application of such potentially powerful innovations as paper, printing, the mariner's compass, and gunpowder, okay, the genesis of war proper. And to the scholars and thinkers of the day, however, it was primarily a time of the revival of classical learning and wisdom after a long period of cultural decline and stagnation. So that's a brief summation of what we popularly understand by the Renaissance. So I'm going to give the floor and the talking stick to Juanita Bonita. Jane here, who's going to share her screen with us and walk us through a sequence of slides which she's prepared. And I will interject and intervene where I deem it necessary. Hopefully I'll be able to put my feet up and snooze for the next hour. When I say snooze, of course, I'll be wrapped with interest. But darling, by all means, share your screen. Let's go. Dive straight into it. The Renaissance as it relates to corrected history.
I was laughing when you were reading that, because I myself never actually read the definition of the Renaissance when I did this. And
Right.
as you were reading off, I was looking at everything you were saying and just laughing, because it couldn't be further from the truth, honestly. Because with this lifting of the veil and the earth being bombarded with these higher resonant energies, we can see so much more clearly now, and it's just all being revealed. And this is so important right now. And I'm asking humanity to revisit creation as our true instrument for positive evolution. we've been giving our creation currency away, and we need to reclaim it for our own agenda. So you will see how the Renaissance completely co-opted our creativity for their agenda. The Renaissance was not the glorious rebirth that you were led to believe it was. It was more likely the rebirth of Lucifer after Nero, the Antichrist, emerged at the end of the so-called fall of Rome. And there's so many things I could say about the Renaissance at this point, but what I mostly want to say is that this work that you see up here was definitely a message from our ancestors from that feudal time that you spoke of in that description. What that really was the end of Tartaria and the Roman Catholic Church coming in and disrupting them, and they called it a feudal system.
Understood. Okay, so move to, yeah, thank you. Now you've moved that, I can see it. Archangel Michael slaying the devil, because that was obscured until a minute ago. Great. So this is really interesting. So you're suggesting the Renaissance was a catalyzing point for the emergence of latter-day Luciferianism.
Absolutely. And from my research, I found that it was so much more than that. It was like a psychological predator nesting operational reset. And the first age of official censorship too. And it set our evolution back about a few hundred years.
Fascinating.
So we'll go to the next one.
Yeah.
And from my research, I can see that we actually came from a truly divine lineage, which was wiped out and existed in a state of harmony with heaven and earth. And this is about 500 years before the Renaissance period started. And this is when the Crusades had begun their pillaging of these peaceful lands, which were referred to in your introduction as the Age of Discovery. And so I believe these people were the true bloodline peoples that embodied the Christ consciousness, and they were destroyed by that whole myriad of premeditated and ruthless actions taken before the Renaissance, but instituted in a formal manner during the Renaissance in order to reset the world.
Okay.
So, they were running around killing Christians for centuries, and it was too financially draining for them. So in the end, they decided to embrace it. There was the Diocletianic persecutions very, very early on, but they were the last and most severe persecutions of Christians. So obviously the popes and the Roman Catholic Church just donned the mantle of false Christianity, much like the Khazarian mafia stole the Jewish signature.
Yes.
And so it's our lineage now that we are fighting our lives against these demonic forces, which are trying to take over the entire planet, to the point where we may never have recovered if we hadn't had help. And we'll go into that a bit further on. And so you can see by these images, there's the wealthy church with all their poor little people following behind. It's no different today than it was then.
All right. So you've got your sort of ermine-clad nobility at the front end, and behind them the scavenging peasantry.
Right, exactly. I couldn't put it better.
Generic classical 5. What's the versus soulful, authentic? Generic classical versus the soulful and the authentic. Interesting. Da Vinci versus El Greco in that sense.
Would you like me to explain?
Please.
So if you look at El Greco's work, you can see that he has this dynamism of self in the work. His soul is being expressed in it. It's not perfect. It's not classical. And he ended up being a forerunner of expressionism, as you can see by his later work there.
Yes.
And with the why I call it the generic classical is because I believe they had a methodology of measuring the human anatomy, and they applied it. And this is how they were able to interchange artists so easily, because it was generic. And this is also another reason why we measure great art as the most realistic, because we're looking back at the Renaissance, but yet it wasn't the soulful art we were told it was. I'm going to go into that a little bit on later. You'll see more of why I say that. So this is the interior of the Raphael rooms in the Vatican Museum. So I'm going to make this statement just to pique your interest, and then I'll explain it later, how the Pope either commissioned this piece by Raphael to show how terrible the fall of Rome was compared to the people and life under the current Pope, or the fresco was already there from the real point in time when it was painted, because it has been proven that Rome fell 1,000 years later than history tells us. Or, here's the most interesting one, you can choose which one you want. Raphael was using camera obscura to paint.
Chiaroscuro, yeah, which is
So chiaroscuro is light and dark, but camera obscura was when they used a lens to, the light came through and it inverted the image on the wall.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So now, because I went down this rabbit hole by myself and I was thinking they were using camera obscura, so when I was hunting around, I found that none other than David Hockney had actually come to the same realization. And he did it with models and he showed how it was done. So there's a very good likelihood that they could have used this camera obscura to get all those perfect proportions, because from the Byzantine period, you know what, that work is very flat and out of proportion and there's no perspective. And then it just jumps to this realism. And then it goes on to mannerism, which seems to pick off where the Byzantine left when you look at art in history.
Yeah.
So this is what they were doing. And David Hockney built up this whole case around it, even wrote a book on it. And so we know now also that these great Roman and Greek artists of antiquity, which it wasn't antiquity, were said to be the inspiration for much of the Renaissance art that was produced. But I think it was created most probably by the divine bloodline that preceded them, whether those be Christians, Tartarians, we don't know, because it's so hard to find information because there's nothing there. So, you know, we sit here risking ourselves as fools for not being these scholars because there is no information to find. We have to deduce it ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, and so another thing that happened was apparently these great ancient Greek sculptors and Roman sculptors didn't have their names attached to their work, which is a very interesting fact, because then that made it so much easier for the Renaissance artists to actually claim them. But I'm going to give you really good examples as we go forward. This is just sort of an explanation, you know what I mean? And you can see here that this doesn't look like the same hand that made these three. They're all so very different, yet they are all claimed to be Michelangelo, and I'm going to go into that a little bit deeper. For instance, that marble slab for the David had been quarried and then abandoned for over 40 years before Michelangelo claimed it. Then they said he worked on it for more than 14 years until he died at the age of 88. And then he was also said to be working on the basilica and this tomb at the same time as well at the age of 88. They all have these incredible abilities to create, but yet you'll go to another description of what he did and you'll find out he created the David when he was 26 years old.
Exactly.
So it's very different. But one thing I found that really stood out to me, Sacha, was that he's actually on record as self-proclaiming that he was neither an architect or a painter. And not only that, he also wrote and published not one, but 2 full-length autobiographies in his own lifetime,
Fascinating.
writing his own biography in stone, I guess you could say.
Let's go. Crusades were specific expeditions to seize strategic and culturally significant land, both Jewish and Muslim, under the guise of being a holy war. I think that's a fascinating insight. The Crusades were a premeditated series of religious wars initiated, supported, and directed by the Roman Catholic Church beginning in 1095. And I notice that is nigh 30 years after the the Doomsday, 1066, right? Because 1066 is a seminal node point that then catalyzed what you're describing here, because 1066 was the onset of, or the genesis point of indexing human beings, of codifying living systems into spells and bonds. Church bans, names, registrations, all of that. When the scribes and the onset of technocrats, bureaucrats, the great scourge of humanity began in 1066 with Doomsday. So I think that that's very interesting connection or parallel to what you're describing here, but crack on, the Crusades, indeed.
Well, yeah, they initiated in 1095 and the first wave ended in 1291. So that's 200 years of that. And then they ended in the 1400s. So that's almost 400 years of crusading around the world and chopping people up, etc., etc.
Right. Doing what? Sacrifice of innocence at the same time, rolling out the franchise of blood cultism, and the genesis of economics, flipping living souls into money, the rollout of the mercantile and Phoenician dragnet, right?
Absolutely. And in 1095, those were just the little first baby steps of the death cult parasite, we've arrived at today. But then along comes flamenco, and him and Putin, really, they dealt us a royal flush, exclusively from Russia. The combination of the Tartarian maps released in 2013, and then flamenco going through, checking on an astrological level at what was going on with the stars and the events on Earth.
Right, as if we could ever make a separation between the two. So what a fascinating triangulation. And curious, Mother Russia coming to the rescue of humanity yet again.
And right now digging out the Khazarian mafia from Ukraine.
Yeah, exposing them with all of their biolabs and
the very root of all that evil. So, but the combination of the maps and flamenco's revised history will forever change humanity's perspective on history as we knew it. So this is huge, because all the scholars of all the days past are basing all their theses on a false history.
Yeah.
And also I want to say at this point too that his credentials are stellar. He worked with the United States in the 70s, trying to figure out how to get to the moon. And that's when he started realizing the stars weren't aligning with everything.
When in the 70s, did you say?
73, I think it was.
Fascinating.
So he's calculating a high correlation and concluding that the ancient history of Rome is a copy of the medieval history of Rome, which clashes obviously with mainstream accounts.
Right.
Of course, he's absolutely not recognized by the scientific community.
Yeah.
And I think it's time for another book burning, but this time it'll be on our side. You see how he would look back at the Middle Ages and see how it was a reflection of the timeline that came before it. And then these fictitious characters were placed on that timeline. So which man really lived? King Uzziah or the Byzantine Emperor Theodosius II? Because it was just a made-up story. And then the historians that wrote all the lies claim that Rome was established in 753 BC and fell in 1453 AD. And it was said to include large territorial holdings around the Mediterranean Sea in Europe, North Africa, Western Asia. But most of that same area that Rome claimed as its own territory was actually a part of Tartaria. And that's when we find that out in the old maps that Putin released. And then what that set off a huge domino effect all over the world. Everybody was looking at Tartaria and the maps. And this is 10 years ago, so we've really discovered a lot since then.
That's right.
And this is what is confirming that the Renaissance was the start of a reset after the decimation of the Tartarian peoples. And that the evidence for this has just spread throughout the world with the advanced architecture and art and technology that's been covered up. And we've been living in a dark age actually since the Renaissance. And I was poking around looking at sculptures and things, and in the background, way in the corner, it was in the Vaticano Museo, and there I saw that griffin. And it has been said that the Tartarians were in Rome, and it's proof that they were there, and it's proof that the architecture was built by them as well.
So basically, classical Rome and the Vatican and all of that stuff, we're essentially looking at ancient Tartaria.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
In the same way that we can say the same in trace elements of the architecture in Prague and Vienna and Paris, not so much Paris, subsequent to the great takedown there, but London, all around the world, in point of fact, all around the world.
You're absolutely right on that. And here I found a snapshot where you can actually see the Roman architectural style connected right there's the Tartarian architecture. You see the difference.
Yep.
It's just as plain as day. And then now we're going and looking at the art. And when we study Bruegel, we also see evidence of Tartaria from the Renaissance in the painting that Bruegel did of these little peasant towns, which it's indicating that, you know, there was a purge and that preceded the town folks' existence.
Yeah.
And the importance of this is obvious. We all know about the three big powers, you know, the independent states of the world that rule the world: financial, the military, and the religious.
Vatican City, City of London, and Washington District of Columbia, which is also a city unto itself. So these are principalities that do not answer to the host nation. They do not answer to anyone other than themselves and their invisible masters.
Absolutely. So on the left, you've got Francis Bacon, and he was the first Viscount of St. Alban and an English professor and scientist. And this man, or I can't even call him a man really, he was a sitting member of the Council for the Virginia Company, involved in transatlantic colonial projects. And this is what he said. He believed that conquest and acquisition of peoples and territories through force, followed by subjugation, conferred a legal right and title. And then in 1801, less than 200 years after Bacon had left his invasive little footprints all over America, That's when the District of Columbia came into being and was ceded from the federal government of the United States. So you can see how early on it was that these three got together and how long we've been sitting under this big power grid of the combination of the Roman Catholic Church, the military power of the United States, and the financial power of the banking system.
And that last observance there with the obelisks taking center stage in the epicenter of each of those principalities within that trifecta, those obelisks, of course, indicative and redolent of allegiance to the cult of Osiris, to the Egyptian cultism.
Absolutely, and all three are from Egypt.
The Black Death plague originated in Kazakhstan in the 1320s, springboarded to 1720. I don't know where that is, the secondary one. 1820, 1920, and then 2020. We knew that there was some key Babylonian Mysterium cult significance with Covidiacy, really being 2020 being that critical year. But its migration followed the sea and land trading routes of the medieval world. Curious. So you're saying that the Black Death plague originating in Kazakhstan in the 14th century was at the same time pursuing this kind of mercantile, meandering mercantile complex, like an octopus that slowly started to circumnavigate the globe, and its migration path following the sea and land trading routes of the medieval world franchised not just the Black Plague, Black Death, but in the wake of it, usury, far more serious and devastating and deadly than a mere plague. So it's very interesting how that evil managed to meander its way into the world.
And this is so interesting too, because they really keep great records of their diseases. So you can really track them by these diseases. It's
Right.
really the backstory behind the Renaissance. And it's only super recently that scientists have found the origination of the Black Death plague, which is Kyrgyzstan, which is right next door to where? Kazakhstan, which is the world's financial superpower, or from whence all this financial stuff originated, and they began to spread out and take over the world. And so they were definitely using these diseases to, to impact or spread. And they say it's spread by human society, but you got to read oligarch into that, in order to affect the global economics and thereby the power structures writ large. And this Black Death was one of the most devastating pandemics in human history. And guess what? It spread from Italy to other European countries. So they brought it into Italy, the seat, the Roman Church, and then it went from there out. And it had a huge effect on everything, the socioeconomics, everything. And it also ensured that Marxism, communism, which is the preferred model for the New World Order's dream political scenario, would eventually be realized about now, because China had meanwhile been creeping to the top of the world economy when the C-19 pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And so now China is at the very top, which you'll see in a graphic later. So we're at that point now where all these diseases have come to the point where, we'll own nothing and be happy and merely exist as their surveilled inventory.
Very good. Okay.
But first they had to sell us the Renaissance.
Yep.
And then as far as the Tartarians go, it was 400 years later that they were killed off by famine. So there you have the complete picture of the complete wipeout. I've always wondered about that, you know, how exactly did they do it? A large part of it was about famine, which killed about 2 million people, which was 30% of the Russian people at the time. And they also said it was the result of a volcanic winter. But, you know, who knows what kind of technology they had? Did they create this volcano? You know, we just don't know, because all the disasters are always being blamed on the wrath of God or Mother Earth. But now we know they may have had technology. And this is one of the biggest, single most invasive doctrines that damaged humanity's true evolution during the Renaissance period. And it was when civilized is superior to indigenous and male is superior to female, the great Renaissance silenced more than half the world forever. So women have been allowed to engage fairly recently in world affairs, but sadly only on the condition that their actions serve the established agenda. But if I was to pick one thing that happened during the Renaissance that affected us more than anything, it would be this: the exclusion of indigenous peoples and women from being a part of humanity's evolutionary process. And Aristotle said it is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. But I would say it is the mark of an uneducated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it, because the exclusivity of the generically educated mind is bound by the bias that civilized is superior to indigenous and male is superior to female.
Very good.
So we had all these European philosophers pontificating about everything, but there was never any input from the indigenous people. So, you know, when you have half the species aren't there from the dialogue, and they've been removed for hundreds of years, so now they have not even a chance of any philosophical debate on behalf of the entirety of our species, which makes the art of philosophy as it stands today, it makes it moot.
Yep.
And then these three characters, oh my goodness, I'm sure you know them well, Sacha.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, I've maintained for years that it was Ignatius Loyola's departure that fine day from the caravan that he was traveling with, when he stopped the caravan and told his retinue, I want to be alone, leave me alone, wait for me. And he left the road with the caravan and went through the woods into a field on his own, and came back some time later, a completely changed being, and had instantaneously, clearly he'd had some epiphany or some demonic intervention, which is my take. I'm desperately curious to know. If I could use a time glass and go back in time, that's the point I would choose. If I could only choose one point in time to go back to observe, I would go back to that day when Ignatius Loyola left the caravan and went into the field on his own. Something happened, because when he returned, he had militarized the message of Christ. He'd weaponized it and set forth his army of Christ. And the perversion that is Jesuiticism, the diabolical, heinous, sacrilegious, satanic evil that is Jesuiticism, emerged that fine day. So I'm very, very curious about it. But yes, indeed. So Ignatius Loyola, to me, the pivotal character, founded the Jesuits in 1540. And then Scaliger rewrote history 1583, and Sir Francis Bacon, as you have alluded already, rewrote the Bible in 17th century, and really, in a sense, deviated the critical narrative almost single-handedly at that point. Yeah.
Well, the thing I love about the statue of Ignatius Loyola, it looks like that's the black sun behind him, and he's got that cross, and he's going to hit somebody over the head with it. So they were working together, as you can see, Scaliger, Flamenco's nemesis, writing history, but there were others. There was Trithemius and Ponvinio, and Trithemius had one of his books blacklisted by the censorship bureau of the Pope because it was sharing the black magic and the spells that were available. But now it was published eventually in 1900. And they just made so much stuff up that people believed at the time as well. But it's been disproved. A lot of the stuff in Ponvinio's work was disproved while he was still alive. And Bacon rewrote the Bible at the behest of King James, and he was a 33rd degree Mason. And his version of the Bible was designed for one audience with a hidden coded narrative in the same text for another audience. So the scriptures that he wrote were written on two levels, a basic level for the ordinary readers and a limited knowledge, and the concealed level for the initiated audience with a higher knowledge, like the occult Rosicrucians.
Yes.
So there we have what they were doing, working together in lockstep to take over the whole academia realm. And then obviously this is the other big one, the unum sanctum, the impact on humanity's demise, also through the control of commerce and everything else, as you alluded to earlier. But if ever there was a reason to call the Renaissance a reset, it would be unum sanctum, which happened in 1300 when the Catholic Church bestowed upon itself the right to ownership of the soul and body of every man, woman, and child on earth. And I think where they got this from was the slavery period just before. I came across a letter that was written by a slave, and it said, "I gave and sold myself of my own free will as a slave to Elias, son of Blasius and Restus, for 4.5 gold coins, valid until my death, so that the said Elias can do with me as he pleases." So there you have, that must have been the model. They realized they could get away with unum sanctum.
So unum sanctum Catholicum means what exactly?
It means defending the goodness, truth, and beauty of Catholicism, because it says unum sanctum Catholicam, defending the goodness, truth, and beauty of Catholicism.
And extraordinary how many people buy into this trite bullshit even today. Quite extraordinary how anyone can defend any aspect or element of Catholicism is just beyond me. It's just beyond my mind. I cannot understand it. Can you understand any part of it?
I have been trying to lately, Sacha, and what I've realized is that the true bloodline of the true Christians has followed through to today, and they still exist, but in a parallel universe or a different timeline than these Roman Catholic SOBs. Right. And I almost forgot to mention the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, the list of prohibited books. That was the first censorship, and official anyway. And today, what do we have? We have Google. So you see the parallels, they just go on and on and on. And Pope Innocent III in 1300, this is what he said: "The Pope is at the center of the world, below God, but above men." and nothing has changed since. And you can just see how the Renaissance was a stepping stone toward globalism, using famine, death, and wars. You know, it's just so obvious now. And then slavery was a huge thing too.
Very good. So some popes in the 1400s arguing for the enslavement of non-Christians as an instrument for conversion. Well, I'm sure it worked. A treat.
Because before 1400, slavery had existed in Europe from classical times and continued throughout the Renaissance. And there were African humans being kidnapped and brought to Italy, Spain, southern France, Portugal, well before the discovery of the New World in 1492.
Yeah.
I found that often these slaves are referred to as other commodities. And we know what that means. Human trafficking.
Yes. Which is still
Slavery.
one of the biggest industries on earth.
And the big thing to me, as far as the Renaissance goes, we can't forget that a slave has no time for creativity or art. And the Renaissance was supposed to be all about elevating human creativity through art. And this just shows it absolutely was not. And just as today we have unprotected borders all over the world today serving the purpose of damaging our true evolution. And what I realized today was the globalists have figured out a way to make the slaves come to them, because it's really easy to indoctrinate the masses of immigrants that are unfamiliar with the language and tradition of the country they arrive in. Hence the reset we're going through right now, because they want to fulfill the agenda of the resetters. So the plan is obviously to kill off the original habitants and replace them with the malleable slave migrant, using disease to aid their plans. And now here we are, all digitally trafficked in this day and age. And that is exactly what is going on today. But they just figured out they don't have to go and take boats and pick people up. They can just bring them over. They can just make them come over here by themselves. And here we are at the beginning of examples of why I believe that art produced by the great artists of the Renaissance did not create the works they were given credit for. And Raphael is a stunning example of that. It puts him in some kind of God category, because he died at the age of 37, yet he's said to have produced a huge body of work that included sculptures, buildings, frescoes, engravings, and paintings. But if he started working, say, when he was like 16 years old, that would give him like 21 years of life to produce all these great accomplishments. But never mind that, he was also orphaned at the age of 11 and is said to have led a nomadic life. So at what point do you stop and weigh the odds, of him creating so much?
Oh, darling, you don't question any of the official narrative that comes out of Oxbridge, for God's sake. Have you learned nothing?
I think I have not. He was like chief architect of the Pope. But the funniest thing of all, I think it's in this slide, I'm not sure. I'll keep it for the next one. So this is the list of all his works. I don't expect you to read them. It's just to show how much, he all the murals and I'm sure they had assistants, and I'm sure that he didn't paint everything by himself. And I really feel that like they were restoring the old pieces left behind by the Tartarians.
Yeah.
Because he worked on St. Peter's. Well, no, he didn't work on St. Peter's. It took 150 years to build St. Peter's, but Raphael built a palace in 4 years. So, there's no way to determine that he accomplished all that he is said to have accomplished. And his level of prolific matches exactly the architect said to have built scores of these huge architectural wonders all around the world. We have one down the road here. We have the Stone Arch Bridge, which was said to be built in 3 years. in the winter months would cut that time in half. But here's the kicker, Sacha. On top of being so busy, Raphael had a reputation for being a sex maniac and was believed to have died of syphilis in 1520 at the age of 37. But here's the kicker of the kicker. 400 years after his death, medical researchers have finally put that tall tale to rest, and a new study suggests that the real cause of his death was a disease similar to the coronavirus.
Well, there you go. There you go.
Oh, and here's Jacopo Galli's garden in Rome, and it's literally littered with ancient sculptures.
Great. Love it.
So many. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, that's a delightful smoking gun in an etching.
Yeah, it sure is. Cream of the crop of my findings. So they claimed that they made them, but I'm sure they found a lot of them.
Yeah.
And they were probably usurping the art from the 1,000 years of peace that preceded them. And this is why they run around purging information and destroying beautiful structures all over the world to hide this stuff. But it always seems to come to the surface. And those Medici, boy, they were quick to go sniffing among the spoils and turn their finds into a lucrative international business model. And those Medicis, you know, for almost 300 consecutive years, they snapped up the art, lied about it, and inflicted untold irreversible damage to humanity's creative evolution in doing so. And here's an example of the first forgery that Michelangelo ever made. And he went and ripped off Cardinal Raphael Riaro, but the cardinal rewarded him for his forgery, and he was invited to Rome, and that's where he became so famous, because of his forgery, and probably to make more forgeries. So these forgeries can't help but arouse suspicion about the authenticity of his other great works. But then at the time, everyone was admiring all these forgeries, and they were selling them, making loads of money. Another thing that Raphael was interested by the way, was the preservation of antiquities amongst all the other things he did. And he had
27-year-old sex maniac. Well, he kept busy. He kept very busy.
He was very busy. And then another thing these artists did is they lifted the faces and poses of these sculptures and these antique art pieces, and they literally dropped them into their artwork. So, you know, there's certain poses that you can take and drop it in. And so it had a lot to do with just copying the ancient. Well, it was, see, even in my head, I'm so brainwashed that I keep calling them ancient when they weren't ancient. And here we have an example of something that was thought to have been the work of Michelangelo. It was the death of Count Ugolino and his sons. So, you know, they make these mistakes, and then they have to go back and keep rectifying them, because it was really easy to confuse, you know, because they were so generic.
Okay.
And then I'm even doubting if Michelangelo painted the Sistine Chapel.
Okay, that's a great statement. I love that. That's a headline.
And here's a photograph of the Roman ruins. So what is that? That's 200 years ago. Is it an archaeological dig or a mud flood? And there's loads of stuff lying around there too still. So, you know, which is the bigger crime? Pretending the statues were authentic and ancient artifacts from eons ago, or Michelangelo and others usurping these ancient sculptures as their own? And I think both. were probably occurring.
So you suggest with Raphael that there's no possibility that he could have accomplished all that he has purported to have accomplished in his 37 years. So number one, that's your takeaway there. And you say the same for Michelangelo.
I'm not as hard on Michelangelo as I am on Raphael. So they were forging everything. It was almost like the crypto of the day. You know, they were shipping it out all over Europe and making a fortune, and they're working together with the popes and everybody, making so much money on all of this, because the collectors of the Renaissance art some wanted it to look great, others wanted to look old and ruined, you know, so they do a little restyling, maybe they change their hair, or they were really fiddling with the old stuff, you know. Okay, so here we are at St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. Oh, this is where Michelangelo crumbles down to the ground, because it was said that he undertook to solve problems raising a dome as large as the Pantheon, but twice as high. And that's when he was said to have spent his final years designing St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. Yep, he's 88 years old. And the building had been in progress for 40 years and was said to have looked like ancient ruins. What does that tell you? So the Catholic Church calls on they didn't have phones then, but calls on Michelangelo and like begs him to finish the basilica. But he had just finished the tomb of Julius II, you know, which was said to have taken him 40 years to do, in between sculpting and painting, completing the Sistine Chapel, writing 2 biographies, you know. And he was preparing to retire, but no, he turns around and takes on this huge project, the highest dome in the world, 448 feet and 1 inch high. So, you know, there's so many discrepancies there. And remember, he claimed that he wasn't an architect. So I can just see all these people sitting around in Rome saying, how can we give Michelangelo the credit for creating this dome? And then there's, let's call it lending sculptural integrity, you know, and they just go on and on with their blah, 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 and we all just buy it. And we believe that just one man is able to design and oversee the building of St. Peter's Dome and fill the church with incredible larger-than-life sculptures, and get up in the roof in the greatest dome in the world and paint it, you know? I don't think so.
Well, you've got to, you know, sympathize with the academics who have, you know, supported and endorsed and espoused these deceptions over history. I mean, the poor things, you know, are born with silken hands in the portals of academia, a very kind of self-serving feedback loop of hubris, and spreading their goose liver pate on crumpets in their heavily funded university digs. I mean, you know, what the fuck? Yeah, it's just so much hubris, so much psycho-intellectual mania and hubris has gone into writing the fucking books. That's the problem. Just tawdry fellows, all too many of them. Not all, it has to be said, some extraordinary minds and hearts, obviously, in academia, but arguably the lion's share of them just, again, a feedback loop of tawdry fellows and their innate hubris.
And not to mention, we haven't even mentioned this yet, Sacha, the giants and the size of the buildings.
Yeah,
you know?
Right. Okay, let's move on.
So here we are at the Palace of Versailles, and Michelangelo, again, is attributed to painting the dome there. But the problem with that is I was looking really closely at it and scrutinizing it, and it just didn't look right.
Mm.
And that is because Michelangelo died in 1564, and that was 3 decades before the Baroque period was said to have begun. And you can see, any eye can see, this is clearly Baroque or Rococo.
Yes, absolutely.
But now they're attributing stuff to him in faraway lands.
This is really interesting, of course, and this is really compelling forensics. Jane, you know what we should do is we should put these questions now to the curators of some of these publicly funded institutions. The Lazarus Initiative should put some of these seminal questions, forensic question marks, and we should formally call out and challenge some of the curators and stewards of these publicly funded institutions, whether you're talking the Vatican or whatever, and put it as an open challenge. What do you think?
Absolutely, because we've got visual proof. You know, it's not like scientific proof where you have to go into a laboratory.
Right.
This is visual proof. You can just see it. Anyone can see it.
Yeah, right. So
Yeah,
Camera degli Sposi Palazzo Ducale Mantua. What are we looking at?
we're looking at the work of Andrea Mantegna. And he also did the Death of Christ. And now I'm looking at the frescoes, and I'm not seeing that it's the same artist here. But it was like an all in the family art business, because Andrea, who was an artist active in the late 13th century, 1431 on, he just happened to be Jacopo Galli's son-in-law, you know, the guy with all the sculptures lying around in the garden.
Yeah.
But he also happened to be a student of Roman archaeology. And he traveled in Italy and maybe Greece, and he collected antique statues and reliefs and vases and made drawings from them and made his collection available for others to study. Now, this just does not sound like an artist to me. You just don't do those things. And another thing he had was a printing business, one of the first printing business in Venice around 1500, you know, when the copper plate printing technology came out. So, you know, I'm just not believing it. And here I'm questioning really deeply now, where are the women painters? Did we ever hear of any women painters before the Renaissance? There are a few during the Renaissance, but these images of these loving, nurturing mothers, they don't carry the resonance or the signature of the satanic Roman Catholic Church. They carry more the energy of a woman painter, the softness and the gentleness. Just, it reminds me of more of like Berthe Morisot's work, you know, when she conveys the loving connection between the mother and child.
Yes.
And in this one too, both the women at the bottom are attributed to the same artist, but they don't look like they're even in the same league. That's Jan van Eyck. So it's just more and more discrepancies, you know, where in many cases, and this is another thing, you never see an artist evolve. You never see, early work, old when they were old. It's always just a perfect thing that they've spit out. You know,
Yeah.
I've never seen the evolution of any of these artists.
Okay.
And so I'm beginning to think that these domes and everything were the work of thousands of artists over many, many years, because there's just too many. There's 900 churches in Rome, and if you add all the private chapels, you get to 1,600 just in Rome. And they're all filled with all of this stuff, you know? And then there's the scope and the detail, you know, and it's just incredible. And here I put this image here because it shows a peeling away dome. And I'm thinking this is probably how the inheritors found the state of the domes that they inherited, and they repaired them. But also, I think the Tartarians had a much more highly evolved way of doing fresco, and theirs lasted longer because the new frescoes peel off and flake away because they didn't have the tech. They didn't have secret ingredients. Okay, now here we have an example of a painting of a building that was done in 1360, but this basilica was said to have taken 170 years of work and the combined efforts of many generations of architects and artists to create. So that doesn't add up, because that's 170 years, you know, and it was changed over time. And it was consecrated as a church in 393 by St. Ambrose of Milan, and it was finished in the 1400s. So that took 1,000 years to complete. There's your 1,000 years. And then, as I said before, all these churches, all these domes, you know, it constitutes so much church decorating, you know, never mind the sculptures to create the inside and on the roofs and everywhere. It's almost like they were decorating cakes, you know, at the rate that they were churning them out.
Yeah.
And then what is never considered is all the ornate decorative carvings and the masonry accompanying the art. Like, who did all that? You know, we don't get the artists who did all the creative decorative edges around everything that we see. And then here again, what about the great height of the arches and the doorways? You know, it's so obviously out of proportion to the size of the men at the time. And then now we're going to go to the exterior sculptures. And this makes me ask why the sculptures of the Renaissance are said to be so remarkable when they hardly differ in anatomical perfection from this whole litter of sculptures that are scattered throughout the world. Here's another one. We have some in Minnesota, there's some in Russia, and all of these perfect stones, sometimes gold-plated, they're all over the world.
All over.
They seem mass-produced just to adorn exteriors of buildings. You know, they really were a dime a dozen, just churned out with no name as to who created them.
One wonders if there was a kind of almost etheric 3D printing technology or something where the artists could be wired up to something and whatever they imagined would be immediately cast in perfect marble or granite or metal. It almost feels as though it's the imagined realm that is instantaneously printed, right? Because it's still a magnificent accomplishment of the imagination in any event. So many of these frescoes and reliefs, which are just staggeringly complex and symbolic and very, very beautiful and powerful imagery. It's not as though they're throwaway. So I don't take away from the fact that the imagined realm is everything, but it just, as you are painting this picture for us, it's increasingly implausible to consider that it's anything other than a kind of magic wand technology. And of course, nowadays, we're almost there. We're getting there with artificial intelligence in these new synthetic software programs where you can just type in a bunch of words and up comes an AI rendered, staggeringly beautiful artwork. I've been studying this stuff in recent weeks with architecture and with artists, and looking at staggeringly powerful imagery and recognizing that they were created in seconds, inputting a little bit of data and then allowing the AI program to do the rendering. And it's almost as though we're getting to that point now, almost, where we could also imagine staggeringly powerful images and statuary and then have them printed instantaneously.
Your perception is so outstanding, because I left this slide out because I wanted to break this down smaller, but there does exist a sculpture called The Young Girl. I think it was Corradini maybe who did it. Corradini, there are a lot of them similar names. But she has this little curl in the middle of her forehead, and there's two of these sculptures. And in the one sculpture, the curl has moved.
Mm.
The other one, it's in a different position, and the stitching on her clothes is visible as if it was just snapped 3D rendition, take another one, and then produced.
Amazing.
I left
Amazing.
that. So we'll move on. We all know this now, that Tartaria is everywhere. We've had the researchers out there for 10 years. We've got elephants, lions, and Greeks. Oh my. We've got griffins and Greek sculpture in Asia, so it's everywhere. And this is very interesting. So watch closely at the slide and you'll see the renovation of it slowly come into fruition. There. So this is how bad the branding is, Sacha. This portrait of Leonardo, you just look at it and you go, Leonardo, it's branded. It's not even him.
Yeah.
He died much, much younger than that. It's probably his father or an uncle. But he's on the cover of all the books about Michelangelo, and we immediately think it's him, but it's Renaissance image branding. And then on the right, we have a painting by Salvator Mundi, painted by Bernardino Luini. And the thing about this painting was it sold for $450 million to Saudi prince. But then they discovered that Leonardo da Vinci hadn't painted it.
Oh, geez.
But then they said, oh, wait, he painted maybe 5 to 20% of it. So it's okay. It's Leonardo's painting.
Wow.
So there you go. It's all about money, right?
Well, no, that art world is all about laundering money.
Oh yeah, and also making money. And here's another funny thing about Leonardo. Oh, he's trying to look so clever. Remember you mentioned Ptolemy? And Ptolemy is famous for his world map. And then in his little index, Leicester, he takes Ptolemy's world map and makes it into this really great illustration with people blowing the wind across the world. And then they also said that he painted the ceiling of Sala de As, and it's like nothing. But the biggest thing that I found out that Leonardo ever said was, the Medici made me and the Medici destroyed me.
Right.
And the thing about the Medicis is that the thing about Leonardo is that he died at 67 years old, yet he's got about 10 paintings in the world, and most of them are unfinished. Adoration of the Magi, or so many are unfinished. So he really wasn't the artist that we think of him as. And guess what? Did you know this? So the greatest painting in the whole wide world, there's two of them. This one on it's called the Isleworth Mona Lisa. And the story goes that Leonardo carried his first little Mona Lisa around with him, working on it for 10 years. So it just doesn't make sense that the second painting, which is the one he carried around with him, took 10 years to paint. And if he churned out this exact proportional replica, it just doesn't make sense. And there's 3 Virgin of the Rocks. They say there's 2, but then I found another one all by myself.
Wow.
So did his assistant paint one? Who painted the third one? There's just no way of knowing. So I'm just going to guess that Leonardo's assistant painted the one on the right, because I recognize the baby in the one on the left, which is in another painting of the Madonna and Child. So there you go, 3 versions of that one. And now we're at Hieronymus Bosch, and this is who the Roman Catholic Church really cashed in on him big time. They had their printing presses. They were sending this out all over Austria, all over Europe, because they were getting their money, their financial instruments for purgatory. So they were putting these images of sin and hell and everything else out there en masse in order to have the ignorant masses come running to them to pay their tithes for their sins. And his work was just so highly prostituted. And he's said to have represented the early Netherlandish painting school, but he was really, truly a representative of the Catholic Church and its huge ad campaign to promote hell and sin and get rich off purgatory.
Interesting.
And then here I'm bringing you back to today with this image, because you can see it's the same old tricks in a different era. And Bosch's gruesome and unearthly depictions of hell have been brought forward into this present time. And the church leaders have made themselves the gatekeepers of heaven, and they're paid handsomely for bestowing upon themselves the power to forgive sin.
Yes.
And claim to have the knowledge of death and the afterlife and the unknown, but meanwhile they're refining the art of spelling and black magic and using it for sacrifices to their true God.
And fucking up kiddies by best accounts.
So here we are.
Long tradition of pedophilia is anything to go by.
Well, I'm getting to that. Boy, that's a blast and a half. So here we are at the printing press. I really don't need to say much about it. You know, they just up their ability to produce images, and also anyone who couldn't read could now visually read. And then they got educated in the arts. But then the next thing we have to ask is, you know, where all those giant books come from with the medieval imagery on the pages. And this is where I go back to the David being 17 feet high.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, did Michelangelo sculpt that? And I read recently, you know, like the stone archways like the Arc de Triomphe, but smaller. Someone said that those could have possibly have been some of the printing presses, but they may have been too big. So now we're at the presence of UFOs during the Renaissance, and
very good. And ancient astronauts.
What the most incredible thing about this is, we know they're out there, and there's some that are benevolent and they look out for us. And it's really weird that in these paintings, they're all either at the birth or the death of Christ. So they're watching just like they do today. So I found that just amazing.
The watches.
Here we are with it's called The Deposition from the Cross by Rosso Fiorentino in 1528. We have a very clear view of a really malevolent looking little demon, and he is also present at the death of Christ. And this is a painting. It's a dome, and I just chose this one piece out of it. It was painted by 2 artists, you know, because they're interchangeable, Federico Zuccari and Giorgio Vasari. And another thing about this basilica was that it was said to have been begun by Pope Julius II in 1506 and completed in 1615. But that's a very, very short, that's a really, really long time for a building. But here we have these 2 artists working on the same mural, which shows that it hasn't got anything to do with the congruency of the style of an individual talented artist. because otherwise they wouldn't be able to merge them.
Indeed.
And here are the Vanquishing of Lucifer paintings, which I feel predated the Renaissance and were a warning to us. It just rings so many bells for me that they're all said to be painted during the Renaissance, and they depict Satan and Lucifer being vanquished. But I'm sure the church wouldn't have commissioned or tolerated these paintings depicting the death of their own God. You know, the Vanquishing of Lucifer paintings, there's so many, I'm sure that they predated the Renaissance and were more likely created during the 1,000-year period of the Age of Grand Tartary. And then I thought this was a dead giveaway with Francisco Goya. He was much later, at the end of the Renaissance, maybe even into the Rococo. But he died miserable, diseased, alone, and he had been commissioned in his heyday by the Spanish churches, and so he knew what they were up to. And I feel like this is almost, these paintings are like his deathbed confession, because they were literally scraped off the walls of his home where he died and reconstituted.
Is that right?
And he had hoped for political and religious reform, but he didn't get it. He was a liberal, and he became delusioned when the restored Bourbon monarchy and Catholic hierarchy rejected the Spanish Constitution of 1812. So then he went downhill all the way after that and exposed them. But it took 50 years after he died for somebody to come along and rescue them. And thank God we have them, because they just show us exactly what was going on.
Fascinating.
Here's your friend.
Yes.
This is what I heard him say. Nero was the Antichrist of the time, and him being right out of Italy, right there, so close to everything, I just had to believe him. So
yeah, let's invite Leo into Lazarus, into a symposium panel for the next Lazarus, so we can pick up on this.
This is why I'm saying that the Renaissance was the rebirth of Lucifer, because the fall of Rome didn't happen when it fell, and then it fell much later, and there's the Antichrist right there in the midst of it all.
But define for me the fall of Rome. If Rome has been running supreme, governing supreme, the hegemony over the planetary mind and heart for the last 2,000 years in any event. So when you talk about the fall of Rome, what are you referring? I mean, arguably the fall of Rome is taking place right now.
Well, in America, it certainly is. Yeah, I'd say so. Absolutely. But the fall of Rome, they say it was 475 AD or somewhere around there. But I honestly believe it was the actual fall, one of the sacks of Rome, when Rome was sacked and all the wealthy elites were run out of town by the peasants. I'm sure that was really it. But, you know, like I said, it's so difficult, Sacha, because your head is full of all the old stuff, and you've got to measure and keep moving the markers, and it gets very difficult.
Well, I mean, when was Council of Nicaea?
I don't know when the Council of Nicaea was.
I'll tell you now. I mean, I've been lecturing on it for a long time. But the exact date was 325 AD. So that was technically the fall of Rome was happening at that time as it reconstituted the evil of the Caesars of Rome, and all of the blood cult formatted itself into the Roman Catholic Church off the back of the Council of Nicaea, and then franchised its way onto the world. So yeah, Rome never fell. Rome changed shape and changed its face and shape-shifted, basically.
Well, they just needed a clear historical marker to make it look like they were starting all fresh and new and enlightened.
Yeah.
So
So
one
the
thing, one
carry
thing about back in the day, you know, people were named after their occupation or their town. And I found it very interesting that the Medici, I looked at the Latin etymology and I came up with medic. And here is where Leonardo played a big part in this, because he was dissecting and drawing the inside of human bodies, which, and they presented it in the name of art, but really it was in the name of science for the Medicis and the
Da Vinci was certainly doing a great deal of that as well.
Yeah, it was Da Vinci.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Or did I say the Medici?
No, you said Michelangelo was doing
Oh,
it.
yeah, I got that wrong. Thanks for correcting me. And so I'm thinking, you know, with the Medici, not only the mentors of the Rothschilds for banking, but they were also the mentors for Big Pharma back in the day too.
Yeah.
And here they are. You know, was the Renaissance actually the rebirth of the beginning of pharmakia? There's a very good possibility of it, because it's all in the name of art, remember? And look at that sketch of the baby in the uterus. Is it from a pregnant woman that died? Or is it a very late term abortion? We don't know.
I like this. The rebirth, I'm taking a note. The rebirth of the beginning of pharmacopoeia, did you say?
Pharmakia and the banking system. And then guess who bought Da Vinci's Codex Leicester, Sacha?
Yeah.
None other than Bill Gates. And he paid over $30 million for it, because he wanted that energy signature. This is a connection, you know?
Okay, I like this. I'm taking notes here, girl.
So today's medics have continued the probing to the point where they are now dissecting the human genome and much more. But he was a forerunner in that. That's where they started it all, probing and digging and diving into the human body, because that's why they killed Jesus Christ, because they saw him lay their hands on people and heal them. And that's the last thing they wanted us to be able to do or learn. They wanted to start digging and cutting and everything else. So it was in 1506 that he started dissecting these bodies. And an interesting story I read was that he sat and watched a peaceful man die, a peaceful death, that he just watched, and then he picked him up, went off with him, and chopped them all up. So I think that's one of the Rome's biggest reasons for killing Christ. I mean, you can call me crazy if you want, but I don't know. When you start putting two and two together, you see a lot. And this is why I'm thinking that this was the roots of transhumanism too, because he was doing robotics and working out the human figure and its movements. And then his robotics became part of his weapons of war series.
Okay, this is very good.
And then here's his body slicer that can chop up people in a war situation. And this is the thought process of a genocidal eugenicist mindset. And he's working on behalf of Satanists, and he's no longer interested in art anyway. He never painted again. And he almost begged the Sporzes to take him in, to finance him to create weapons of war. I read the letter that he wrote them. And yet he's supposed to be this great polymath genius, Madonna painter, you know, and you'd think he would be inventing things for the betterment of humanity and not its demise. And here's my little cherry on the top from going up into the late 1600s, 1700s. This graphic is really a great metaphor for the Renaissance hidden agenda, because it's along the same vein, pardon the pun. We have more probing and experiments into the human body in the 1700s with Dr. Giuseppe Salerno's experiment commissioned by this flamboyant Prince Raimondo di Sangro, and he was said to have been the Da Vinci of his time. He was initiated into the ancient alchemical rituals, sacred art or king's art, they called it, which had been handed down through the centuries from Egyptian priests, you know, through their disciples. And he was the one that introduced Freemasonry to Naples and became the head of the Neapolitan Masonic Lodge there. And then there's this weird technology that he used to create the veiled effect over the Christ. So you can see that, the way that veil falls, and that's made of marble, and it looks for all the world like cloth.
Yeah.
So people have decided that he's using this ancient alchemical knowledge to create this. And then meanwhile, in the underground chamber of his San Severo chapel, you have this machine anatomiche, which are these anatomical models which have reproduced the entire circulatory system of a woman and a man, their whole arteriovenous system, and it's almost perfectly intact. And this Giuseppe guy made it in about 1763. And there's this legend going around that this Di Sangro guy, together with the doctor, used two servants for these alchemical experiments. And the woman at the time was pregnant, so there used to be a little baby at her feet, but somebody ran off with that in 1990. And so there's all these legends, you know, but whatever's going on, I mean, he's also said to have killed people so that he could use their bones and skin for experiments. But you can see it goes deeper and deeper and deeper into the occult as they move on. And then here's the famous, I looked for current signs of the banking magnates. And so it looks like the Rothschilds were definitely taking on the whole Medici, and there were the Fuggers. If you ever wondered where the name "you dirty fugger" comes from, it must come from Italy. And then there were the Royal Habsburgs too. And all family dynasties still have operational banks today, but I'm really doubting for very much longer because nothing much has changed.
Yeah.
And, you know, so that's exactly what the Renaissance period accomplished. You know, what it set out to establish, as you mentioned in the very, very, very beginning of this presentation.
Very good.
And then here come the robber barons, the wretches of riches, and we know all about them. One thing that came out of the Renaissance period, Sacha, is inventiveness. So that, they saw all these inventions, the creativity had been stimulated, but they soon quashed it. They threw out Tesla's stuff from Tartaria and all that, and they brought in Hollywood, Disneyland, Soho, coming right around the corner for the whole entertainment distraction. And they quickly sought to prevent any further surges of human inventiveness by establishing those think tanks to curtail our creativity, and by establishing a hierarchical, exclusive education system, which I call academia, i.e. the great forgetting.
Very good.
And now I'm looking at, we're very close to coming to the close of this now. So I'm just going to show you here that the European economy in 1500, Italy was at the top, and it was almost double anyone else in the whole of Europe. And in 1500, it was obviously at the top. And then as we move forward in time, we see that Britain gets the crown, goes to the top, and we can see China at the very bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And the United States isn't on the map yet because they didn't have statistics. But then as you see, we jumped to 2020, we've got China at the top. The whole Marxist, fascist, communist, socialist agenda is now winning. And it just shows us it only took 70 years for that to happen. So it just shows you so clearly how they can manipulate the whole world economy in 2 seconds, of time. And then obviously this death and devastation has continued, and I'm sure it was a lot the same back then, just slaying people. And now what they've cleverly done is they're mining essential products for people in the industrial countries to just survive, because they have to have these things in order to play in the marketplace. If you didn't have a phone, you probably couldn't make a living.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go through this really quickly now because I feel like it's gone on a bit long. Do you agree?
We're almost out of time for sure. In fact, we're over time.
Okay, well, maybe I'll skip this part. It's all about the pedophilia.
Run through the slides.
Okay, well, the pedophilia and the pederasty that was going on, and the sexual deviations were very much a part of the lifestyle of the royalty. You had Ambellus and Dionysus was the god of wine, and I'm connecting the wine to the grapes and the fruit and all of that, which is connected to adrenochrome. And this brings us right up to the present day where we have the pedophilia now. And then same thing here, and the satyr and the goat-like worship and all of that. And this little Ambellos is really a mini little baby goat that they're fornicating. And then I'm saying here that the Great Renaissance did nothing at all to elevate neither art or humanity, because this is the point we've reached with Marina Abramovic and her disgusting art. And then I'm saying that we've been living on a malevolent false timeline comprising of indoctrination, dehumanization, and pseudo-religion. And the periods of this Saturnalian timeline are ab initio, from Babylon to the Dark Ages, medieval Dark Ages to the fall of Rome, and opus evil would be their closing scenario, opus evil, which was the Renaissance to the present. And then I'm saying if they can jolly well create a damn timeline, then so can I. And I'm going to create the timeless creation timeline, which comprises of edu-creation, compassion, and transcendence, the initiation of Christ consciousness through organic evolution being earth consciousness, actualization being consciousness of the self, and then ascension, which is cosmic consciousness. So let us depart the Renaissance model and the monster it has become today in the dust of history forever.
Very good. Very good. Okay, unshare your screen kindly. Good. Thank you. Fascinating. Very, very interesting indeed. The takeaway there for me is that the Renaissance is emerging as being the counterpoint to what we've been led to believe it was. So we're led to believe that the Renaissance was the point of emancipation, enlightenment, and so on. It appears that it may well have been the polar opposite. It was the great subversion, Psyop, which was a takedown of the enlightened and the Enlightenment, a breaking of the trajectory of history that connects us to the true Enlightenment, which would have been more connected to ancient Tartaria and so on. In which case, it's a very, very clever Babylonian Romanesque intrusion and interposition. Very, very clever indeed, and does explain a great deal, I must say, a great deal. So congratulations, you.
Thank you. Yes, it was a tragedy, to say the least, because we've lost all that evolution.
Right. But I love this, Jane, because it's a seminal piece in the correcting of history. I attribute this to you because I've never seen this even intimated anywhere else. But perhaps more stuff will come forward for sure. I'm wanting to put you and this narrative into a symposium format with historians and leading pundits, like we've discussed. Leo Zagami, maybe Santos Bonacci would be a good one as well. And for sure, I have one or two heavyweight theologian historians, which I'd like to bring in to this. And let's drill even further into it. What I'd like to do, as I said earlier, is have Lazarus Symposium sign off on a white paper on this subject of the Renaissance being a historical subversion, and establish some essential questions based on forensics, which we can then formally dispatch to by registered mail to the curators and stewards of the Vatican Library, of various other publicly funded institutions. Again, they're all publicly funded in the main. I think that they all are, but certainly in the main, they're publicly funded. This is public purse stuff. We have a right to question what the fuck the British Museum have been doing and what measure of deception they may have.
Well, I know that they have all of Charlemagne's armor over there, and you can't understand what's written on it until you translate it into Muslim or Arabic.
Interesting. Well, there you go. So let's do that. Let's see if we can format some essential questions based on, with the Renaissance in our targets, and see if we can call out. But first, we would need to craft a white paper and then have that signed off on. So let's look to accomplish
so
that.
do you'd see a paper of questions then, referring to the white paper?
I see a white paper which describes this theory that's emerging about the Renaissance being a complete fraud, and then put some questions to these publicly funded curators and stewards of museums, art galleries, historical houses, institutions, and so on, and send them off and see if we can get some goodly, godly responses from some of these people. They may well be piqued sufficiently.
Well, I think it would shake them up, because even your average person who loves the Renaissance and thinks it was this thing of enlightenment, they get harmed by even reading anything about this, you know?
Well, I'm harmed by even the notion that the Renaissance was a complete fraud, because the Renaissance to me is, let's say psycho-intellectually, the Renaissance has been for me an important backdrop to my own notions of enlightenment and of aesthetic and so on. So for me, I was compelled when you told me that you think you've uncovered the truth of the Renaissance, because it immediately kills that sacred cow in my own psycho-intellectual armory. And I like to have my sacred cows killed in
Good.
front of
I don't necessarily like to go around killing cows myself.
Well, good. Look, that's taken us to well over the appointed time that we have, but this is going to run in any event that for the duration, and I'm sure that the audience, which is going to be commenting and feeding back, I think that if the time works out on the day, you and I might even be able to jump on the back end of when this is inserted into the Lazarus broadcast, because this is going to the public. This is open source at the end of the private symposium. And then maybe you and I can make ourselves available for another half hour or 45 minutes of Q&A with people who are watching this right now.
That would be great. I'd love to do that, Sacha.
Thank you very much, darling.
Okay,
This is the first in a series, because we're going to be drilling a great deal further into this. So thank you, Jane.
Absolutely a pleasure. Love you,
All right.
Sacha. Bye.
Love you. There you go.
I see that.
You're muted, Sacha.
You know, that's what happens after what, 6.5 hours of broadcasting. You go dopey. Forgive me. Just to say, let me bring my girl on now, because I'd like to have commentary with her. Welcome. Good to see you. I don't know why I'm hearing feedback. Do you have two devices open? Am I able to hear you, Jane? Can you speak?
You have to turn yours off, Jane.
Jane, are you hearing me? Are you hearing me or are you not hearing me? Okay, this is not working.
Yeah, she can't hear you, so you have to mute when she talks, and I have her on Skype.
So she can hear me now? She's
you
not
hear me?
nodding.
No, because
So I'm sorry, I can't hear anything.
Okay, well, this is definitely not going to work.
Can you hear her? Try again, Jane. Test to talking now, Jane.
Test to talking now, Jane. Test to talking.
Okay.
No, guys, I'm going to kibosh this. This is definitely not going to work. Jane, you're not hearing me, I'm assuming, because I've been speaking for the last 3 minutes. You're not hearing me, right? You're not hearing me, right? You're not hearing me, right? Okay. No, it's not going to work. Jane, I love you, girl, but we're going to have to come back, do this Q&A. I'm actually happy to do it even this week as a sequel to this. So, Christy, kindly, let's schedule it. I'll do a live Facebook show. We'll promote it. It'll be a Lazarus offshoot, but it'll be open source. This is important stuff. And to the members of the audience who are interested, and there's thousands of you, thank you for such amazing insights and feedback that we've been getting.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but I don't think this relay is going to work terribly well. Are you hearing me? Okay, I'm taking control of the studio. Sorry, love. Christy, kibosh it. I don't want to bore a live audience with this kind of technical nonsense. So, friends, there's not much I can answer single-handedly. There's some stuff I know about the Renaissance, but I'm certainly not up to par as Jane Evershed is. What is interesting, of course, adding to the Raphael, Michelangelo, and Da Vinci scam is Caravaggio. Amazing Caravaggio, who is now, we understand, purported to have done one painting a week. Let me tell you, it's going to take about 3 months to do a painting, a Caravaggio painting. And even that's without sleep or without eating. But no, history tells us, informed or orchestrated, engineered history tells us that he did a painting a week. You know, that accounts for the remarkable output of this unfathomably brilliant painter. Fuck that nonsense. In any event, thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. Don't go away quite yet, because the final segment, open source one, I'm about to drop in now. And that is a conversation with Dr. Christina Ram and Clayton Thomas. And again, friends, not to be a fright merchant, but as the entirety of this 6-hour broadcast has been speaking to, or certainly about 5 hours of it, the redemption of our DNA and our mRNA from the satanic intervention of injections, synthetic molecules being pumped into our veins, the shedding that's been going on, all of that stuff. I don't want to be too outspoken right now because this is open source and they will almost certainly take this broadcast off if I speak in blunt terms. You all know what I'm referring to here. Dr. Christina Ram, one of the most remarkable medical scientists and scientists proper, I believe, in the world today. And I think, as I've said for the last year or so, I think that history will reflect that she's one of the seminal angelic savant medical scientists born at this time, incarnated at this time, in order to help with the redemption of our DNA and our mRNA from this satanic intervention that's going on. And again, it's not just the so-called, injections. It's also to do with glyphosates and all of the synthetic molecules and poisons through geoengineering and through the pharmaceutical enterprise that has afflicted our planet for the last 120 odd years, since really the turn of last century, when the Rockefeller Convention really kicked in and these sons of bitches really decided to weaponize food and take control and hegemony over human health by destroying all vestige and remnant of real healing techniques and technologies, organic, homeopathic, all of the real stuff, the home brews and home remedies. There was no such thing as cancer really 100 years ago. That's something which, and now 2 out of 3 people are going to die of it, kind of thing. It's just insane, the figures. Why? Well, that's because we've allowed, through the intervention of the Catholic Church, the Jesuitical intervention, the Catholic Church and their franchise, which is called government. Government's being controlled by the purse, always by the corporations. Governments themselves being a privately owned corporation, as you all well know, securitizing the living souls, the citizens, through treasury bonds and birth certificates and all that crap. So all of that Luciferic satanic nonsense has led to COVID and COVIDiocy and to our systemic failure as a species to be able to steward our own planet and our own biosphere. So there are those of us, including you, my very brilliant audience, and I say that I'm not being churlish, I mean that. There's so many intelligent people in this audience, and I'm so blessed and grateful for this level of consciousness. But you know, and I know, and we know what's going on. And increasingly, the mainstream narrative is also picking up on the fact that it was all a monstrous heist. Of course, little pundits like me were out there on the front line 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, actually warning about it. It came down the pike. It happened. I believe we're going to see the back of it between now and 2025. But we do have monstrous intervention of our blood, of our DNA and our mRNA, this CRISPR technology that Pfizer has been leading the fray in. Speaking of which, tomorrow I've got the Arise Guerrilla News broadcast. And for anyone wanting to, Christy, kindly drop into the comments section the AGN URL so that anyone who's interested in seeing, watching the show tomorrow, I don't know what time it is offhand. I wish I had that data in front of me. I'm a little bit behind. I'll do media drops tomorrow morning, a couple of hours before the show. It goes live for 2 hours. We've got some of the most sensational and controversial icons in the world today coming on live to dish the dirt, tell the truth about what's going on, what's being discovered, the fall of Rome, meaning to say Washington, D.C., and the hegemony of these globalists and their filthy, dirty agenda against the angelics, the Adamites, the living men and women of the living soil, the sons and daughters of God. That, my friends, is you and me. So the AGN Arise Guerrilla News broadcast tomorrow is going to be really sensational. Do not miss it. Before I do this final drop and let you see this conversation I had with Dr. Christina Ram a couple of days ago, we had to pre-record it. She's come under a lot of fire because she was in Davos in Switzerland at the World Economic Forum, and I, for one, am very grateful that she was invited there and she went there. She describes a little bit of the spooky shit that happened to her once she got there. Classic example of globalist cabal interests trying to get hold of people like her to bring them on side. It's happened to me on a number of occasions over 20 years. Never worked, never will. And I'm glad she went to Davos. I'm glad she saw what she saw. And I'm glad that she brought her frequency into that fold. And I personally endorse good people, good leaders, good scientists, good academics going in and threading their frequency into the globalist narrative wherever they can, whether that's taking up invitations to go to the Tavistock Institute for their annual Christmas dinner, whatever. If we continue to play the binary dialectic and say, no, I just have nothing to do with that, I'm not going to accept any of those invitations, then we are truly dualistic and binarized. It's black and white checkerboard, and it's going to be that kind of standoff. We have to thread light and frequency and emancipation, enlightenment into the shadowland. And that's what those kinds of forums can also be, an invitation for brave people to be able to thread light and frequency into the portals of power. Don't forget that. It's very important. I know that a number of idiot speculators out there, many of them, in fact, have accused me over the years of being a crown agent and a Illuminati scion and a United Nations man, all that. These are morons who've never once bothered to watch a single media drop of mine and have understood that I have been probably, as a pundit, a frontline activist pundit, probably the most outspoken voice in the world, systematically, non-stop moving against the globalist narrative, the United Nations narrative, whilst at the same time reminding good people of the world that there are so many good people trapped in those systems, in the UN, in those portals of power. These are good academics, good people who for the best will in the world, got sucked into, got vocations, got jobs in those institutions and agencies and multilateral organizations, thinking that they were going to help to, feed the kids in Ethiopia or whatever. And before you know it, once you're entrenched after a year or two and the honeymoon period is over, you start to look around and realize, hang on, it doesn't matter what you try and do as an initiative or as an enterprise to bring harmony or righteousness or judiciousness into the job. You start to see that it doesn't matter what you do. Upstairs, there is a technocratic sliver upstairs that will always be blocking those moves. And by the time you realize that you have just been sucked in with your PhD into that political establishment or that economic financial establishment or that cultural establishment, you realize it's too late. You're in bed and you've got kids that you've got to put through school. You've got mortgages to pay. And so people get trapped. Good academics and good people get trapped inside these institutions, oftentimes when they think it's too late. I still say to them, with the great measure of love and respect, fuck you. Get out of your job. If you know it is an affront against your soul, if you know that you are participating on the checkerboard of the kingdom of the devil by working for the banks or working for the pharmaceutical industries or working for any of this globalist hegemonial enterprise, it is on you to excise yourself, save your soul, and redeem yourself. Find a new vocation. Get out of Dodge, get your kids, get your family, get them out of cities, get them out of the citadel. Sodom and Gomorrah is all around us, friends. We've arrived at that time. So this here, boom, is the last segment. This is the Roots update with Dr. Christina Ram and her very brilliant partner, Clayton Thomas, a magnificent guy. Love him very much as a brother. He has sexier sunglasses than Colonel Gaddafi, if you can believe that. And he certainly has one of the greatest women on earth as his wife, Dr. Christina Ram. Anyone wanting to take this down, I would write it down now if you've got a pen, because by the time you have seen what she has to tell you about the injections, about what's going on, you're going to want to check out the formulas and the solutions that this genius has devised to help eradicate vaccine injury and the redemption of DNA that's been intervened with this CRISPR technology. So don't muck about. Take that brand link down, check it out. And again, this is the start of the Roots update. I'm going to bid you farewell. It's been a very, very long day for me. I'm going to be back online with the Arise Guerrilla News broadcast tomorrow, so I need to get a little bit of sleep tonight. Let me just go in, bid adieu to the audience of Lazarus, which I'm happy to say is a record audience. Very, very happy to see that. I'm going to go in now and select the last media file. Here it goes. Stand by. Thanks, friends, for joining me today.
Yay. Well, I just landed in Cancun in the last hour, having come from Istanbul, and I'm looking through my screen at two of my favorite people. Well, one of my favorite people, that would be Dr. Christina, and the sidekick. Oh, Clayton, that's so not true. You're the closest thing I have to a buddy, just so you know.
That's right, and Crumpet.
You look great, Sacha. It's so good to see you. We talk about you all the time. In fact, it's interesting. I'm always like, I can't believe we never talked to Sacha, because I wish I had more time with you. I really do. But I'm glad you're doing amazing. You look amazing.
Thank you.
You've lost about 25 years.
So have you guys have come from the salamander cesspit? Are you back home yet?
I was in Munich and had meetings, and then I went to Davos actually by myself. Yeah.
Laura, let's talk about that a moment, because I want to come to your rescue slightly there, if I may. Let me set the tone, because just when you mentioned Dr. Christina Rams going to Davos, that of course throws a huge wrench in the works for a lot of people, because of these misconceptions, preconceptions, and also infantile notions about why on earth would she want to be rubbing shoulders with Greta Thunberg and Klaus Schwab and all of these salamanders. Well, the point being that, you know, you have to go in there in order to be the light and to infect and transfect the narrative. So I personally was delighted when I heard that you were going to go to Davos. I was really thrilled for all the right reasons. But tell me, what was your takeaway?
Well, so, I told you before, Sacha, I've spent so much of my life on science, and then also spiritually. I'm an extremely spiritual person. I felt this when I was a young child. And so I'm guided by this consistently in my life. And I feel like you and I have kind of the same connection. I'm not really guided by what people think, but I will tell you, I had a ton of criticism for going. I was asked to go by the European Women's Association, who is backed by the European Union, but to speak about female empowerment and different issues that pertain to future generations and what we should do as women. And so for me, I don't think I completely understood what Davos would be like. I do now, because I've been there. And I actually ended up doing 2 talks, but was asked to do a lot more. And then I was asked to a lot of parties and a lot of after parties.
Which you didn't go to.
Which I didn't go to.
Yeah.
It was a unique experience for me, because when I got there, and we actually brought Brad Mathis, who I've worked with, because Clay was coming, and then unexpectedly, which I feel like this was planned, he was called to a meeting that they said he had to go during those exact days. And he tried to say, well, I need to take her to Davos because I don't want her going by herself. And some pretty influential people said no, he had to go then to South Carolina, and that I could handle that by myself. But I went with Brad Mathis, who I've known for 20 years, who tried to talk me out of going. Ted Baker tried to talk me out of going. Basically, everyone tried to talk me out of going, but in my heart, I kept feeling like, no, I need to go, because Davos is what people say. There's a lot of discussions on depopulation. There's a lot of discussions on how we won't have meat or food, by 2030. A lot of discussions on it's okay, some of the stuff that's happened because we needed less people on this earth. Candidly, a lot of discussions I didn't agree with.
Yeah.
But then I got to have a voice, and my discussions were on how we need to make our world better, our land, air, and water. We need to regenerate our bodies and animals and our earth, because all the DNA is connected. A leaf of tree is connected to us. And instead of trying to get rid of people, we've got to support this earth that we have and really make our lives more bioavailable and better, so that we can achieve a higher level of learning and understanding and create this better world, right? So it was interesting, though. I became very sick the day I got there. Probably one of the, I don't even know how to describe it, extremely high, very sick.
103-degree temperature.
Kept getting sick.
Wow.
And it was very, you couldn't even go a mile. To drive 4 blocks was an hour and a half. There were so many securities, so many badges, so many ways to get in or not get in. But it was interesting. I got invited to a dinner by the owners of most of the hotels. Our hotel was next to like the Vice President of the United States and different people. But it really wasn't an invitation, because we said, well, we already have dinner plans. And we were told, no, we were asked to bring you here. And this has been planned. This is a surprise. This is something we think that you would enjoy. And it ended up being a pretty bad evening, to be honest. They immediately asked me, there was the owner of the hotels and then a bunch of bodyguards, I guess. Their explanation were they were friends, all men, very nice looking men.
Right.
And they wanted to know what I was speaking about and how I would be presenting it and what my thoughts were. And they even asked me my thoughts of depopulation. They let me know that we don't need all these people. We do need people to clean and cook, was one of the statements that were made, but there's too many people on this earth that aren't of value. So we had that conversation. I told them what I would be speaking on. Anyway, they bought us very nice food. They bought us, I didn't know what kind of alcohol it was. The guy, Brad Mathis, that I was with said, Christine, this alcohol is like $2,000, $3,000, $5,000. It was cognac and different things. I just basically started getting nervous a little bit. And then they told Brad that they were going to walk me back to my room. And Brad said, no, we're going to walk. He said, I'm going to walk her back to her room. And they refused. They said, we're going to walk her anyway. We want to make sure we want to make sure we're watching her during this event. And I kind of had stuff like that happen the whole event.
Yeah,
But
you get ghosted, and the narrative is scrutinized, and it's a bit creepy. I had the same thing at the United Nations, especially when you're getting access to the Security Council and what have you. It starts to get really slightly otherworldly. But that is because these are agents, and honestly, you don't even know if they're human in some cases. I know 10, 11, 12 years ago at the United Nations, I was interfacing with certain uniforms, certain people carrying certain powers who I genuinely was chilled to the bone when dealing with them, because they were not human, did not have any kind of resonance at all. They were functionaries and absolute in how they conducted themselves. But it's just one of those weird things when you're really at near the seat of true power, false light power in this world. It does start to get a little bit spooky. So, well, congratulations for seeding whatever you did there.
Well, I felt like I'm not sure I touched anyone. I tried. I met a lot of important people and was asked to the castle, to the royal family and stuff like that. I did not go. I actually felt so sick that I left a couple of days early. I did do the 2 of the talks, and I felt like it was enough and I needed to leave. And so, but I'm thankful I went. I tell you what was very hurtful, and I'm not trying to be emotional because I feel like I'm a pretty strong person and I'm pretty centered, but I've had so much criticism. And I've had so many people, like I was at an event this week. I actually came home and had to do an event. We had a lot of people, doctors and nurses, at an event in Nashville. And I had one lady say she wanted to spit in my face because she's a pretty influential woman.
Oh.
I don't want to mention names though, but she said anyone that was invited to Davos was obviously a bad person, and anyone that chose to go was obviously an evil person. And she wanted to know why I was invited and then why I would go. And she just told me she didn't have any respect for me. And I'm really kind of blown away by that, because I have to be honest, Sacha, I can stay in a box and just never do anything, or I can try to make good decisions and do good things because my heart is centered right.
For sure, but you have to do it. It's, you have to be on the front line in that sense, and seeding, and not just speaking truth to power, but interfacing with it. It's to my mind, it's seminal. I've been doing it a long time, unashamedly, unabashedly. I've been called every kind of stooge and shill and agent under the sun, and yet I'm still constantly on the front foot, constantly breaching that veil, and I'll just continue doing that. But I wonder, do you think that the sickness, cellular response taking place quite seriously to that etheric field?
I'm not sure. It would not shock me, because it was just really interesting. I became extremely ill. Like it was almost unbearable. I can't believe I was able to do the talks. And, I don't know if you know this, Sacha, but we're launching a clothing line during Fashion Week. And it is a clothing line I developed while I was at Harvard that protects the body against radiation, all the different pollution, EMFs, nuclear waste. And I did a couture line because my idea was, let's do something that's beautiful and fun for animals and humans and babies and everything else, but yet it has this built in. And then I had developed what's called the super skin coating, which does that too. So we were launching it. We're actually launching it on Runway 7. I wish you could be there on Fashion Week on February 10th. And the week before, I actually went to something, and I have to be very careful. I can't get into where I went, but I was invited to what was supposed to be this amazing event that was fun. But instead, I was brought into different rooms and questioned about this clothing line. And then again, that happened right when I got to Davos. They knew everything about me. It was really kind of bizarre and very interested. And then another thing I keep getting questioned on is, we've heard you've done things with regeneration and with anti-aging, cloning, and things, people living longer. I was even asked a question, what do you think about bioprinting? And I said, it works. You can actually bioprint a human body. But my next response was going to be, but you can't stabilize the brain, the neurotransmitters yet. And they're having, but I didn't say that. Instead, the person that was actually talking to me, who supposedly was a lay person, right, said, well, you're wrong, because we haven't been able to stabilize the brain and the neurotransmitter. And I said, you know what you're never going to be able to stabilize is a heart and a spirit.
Right. No
you can't
shit.
make that. And so it's interesting how this all happened, in a sequence of 2 to 3 weeks, and how it became impossible for Clay to come with me. And my heart was actually very sad, because between you and I was scared and a little uneasy, and felt I did not feel comfortable the whole time. And you're talking to a person probably a lot like yourself. I feel comfortable pretty much everywhere. I was in Lebanon when we were bombed, by Syria. I mean, I'm very comfortable, but I did not feel comfortable in that setting.
No, I feel it. Well, I remember the day I crossed the threshold into the Holy See in the Vatican, I passed out literally as I was crossing the threshold. And the same thing happened the first time I crossed the threshold into the Security Council underground in the United Nations. I also passed out and was caught momentarily by someone behind me. There's just something, I sensed that there was some kind of a plasma field that's been in place. I'm certain in my own mind that they've been using very advanced kind of technologies to, I don't know, in a sense, augment the field, or do something to the field effect. For sure. For me, it's very, very palpable. Did you feel the same thing generally in and around Davos?
I did. I felt like it was a different feeling, a different setting. Something was majorly different. I'm sure. Have you ever been to Davos? I don't think Clay has.
No,
I had never. I don't think I had ever been to Davos. It's interesting, if you look at the mountains right before you come into Davos, there's all these military bases built into the mountains.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there's all these different platforms, bunkers. And Brad Mathis, again, who was with me, was like, Christina, you got to look at this. And it's so interesting, but I definitely felt something I've never felt before. And I'm pretty astute at feeling things energetically. And I think that's because I am so spiritual, and I have this, just this belief, and this, it's not even a belief. It's a factual thing with me, of knowing that there's these good forces, but I also know there's bad, And so when people say to me, they talk about conspiracy theories, what do I think? And here's what I always say. It's not a conspiracy theory that there's good and evil. It's not a conspiracy theory that there's this underlying evil, bad manipulation of human life that's going on. And obviously we've seen this shift. And I can tell you, if you ask me, did I feel a lot of good energy there? I didn't feel any.
You've got the biggest gathering on Earth of sociopaths, de facto, de jure, fully paid up sociopaths. Small wonder. I don't know if you saw the footage of Greta, the little Chucky doll, ghastly creature. Did you see the footage of her in Davos
getting arrested?
No. Well, no, not that one.
Well, that was before. I didn't see her in Davos, though.
Oh no,
I think I saw a photo.
That was all green screen stuff and theater. That's all been exposed fully. So the protest and the arrest was all theatrics, which people should be arrested and go to prison for. But the point being that she was jumped on by a bunch of fabulous ambush journalists when she was walking on her own, and she couldn't escape, couldn't run anywhere. So they completely pinned her. They walked alongside her, asking her questions about climate change, and it's completely exposed her. I mean, that if you haven't seen it, you really must. What I might do for my audience is get an outtake of that and edit it into this footage here, just to give them an idea of what you're dealing with in Davos. But was there much talk of her, for instance? Were you aware of Queen Greta at all?
No,
there was.
I know.
I'll show her some of that. There was one thing that she brought up that was a topic of discussion. Is their goal to eliminate what we've heard was like 20%. They're more like 30 to 40%.
Right.
There was one class that they wanted to keep.
Not everyone.
Not everyone.
No. Yeah.
Why did they want to keep the kids?
I don't. That's not what they said.
They said they needed kids because of their blood.
No, they didn't. Well, they didn't say it exactly like that, but basically that, children, they did explain to me about children and how that they have this blood that is, very, how did they say it? Worth a lot of money.
Jesus.
And so,
Evil fuckers.
Okay. Paul,
no, I'm sorry. This is true. Because
Okay.
he knows where it's going.
Yeah.
So it was, but also I have to say, I think that there's, people like me, let me say that people that are of a need to help, whether you're evil or good, and I've said this before, there's a need for people that can help even bad people live longer and be healthier. And for me, I know this probably sounds naive, Sacha, but for me, I just hope that in some way I touch people in some format, because when I talk to them, I'm very sincere. I never change my story.
Yeah.
The one thing I did do that I think that was, I typically wouldn't do, but I was smart enough to do. And of course I was very aware of the situation, is listen and say, I understand your viewpoint, but this viewpoint is the wrong way of thinking. But here's the issue. When you're a billionaire, and I know there's billionaires that care a lot about people. So I'm not just saying everyone that's a billionaire is bad or everyone that has money is bad. But when your philosophy is, it doesn't matter about the lower socioeconomic people, it doesn't matter about older people, it doesn't matter when people have autoimmune disorders, it's okay that people die. That is just so different than any philosophy I can even think of. That's so different than my heart. And it hurts me so severely that I have this thing I do that I always imagine that I'm kind of flying above everyone and I'm helping them, and that I'm trying to help people and to heal people and to help their hearts. But I had a feeling while I was there that there wasn't much I could do. If that sounds,
no, I get it.
That sounds, I felt like there's not much I can do here. But the interesting thing is, I was asked to speak more and more and more. And since I've been there, I've had so many messages and so many comments. The more I declined things, which what ended up happening, and I told Clay, even the things I scheduled to go to at night, I canceled all of them.
Yeah.
I just kept canceling
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
And so the more I canceled, the more people literally begged me to go.
Well, I wonder also if part of the reason why you were invited and that these kinds of invitations are likely to continue to open up is because Roots and the Root brands have begun a kind of business commercial story, which is remarkable. It's seriously interstellar, the way that Root brands is taking off. So, these people out there are kind of watching the margins, and they're seeing also that in the world of breakthrough formulas and supplements, which is in a sense the most important arena of focus in the health science spectrum, because you are the answer to the call of people dying all around the planet from autoimmune deficiency and the breakdown of health and wellness connected to the weaponization of air, water, food, and so on. So here you are, a well-established, sort of monumental figure in the health medical science arena all around the world, and you've launched a brand and a series of products within that brand, and they are taking off hugely. They're going interstellar, and that's because they work. It wouldn't happen if there wasn't this phenomenal feedback going on. I know, because I'm, to some extent, I've been tracing and ghosting Root brands in the course of the last year, over a year, in fact. And what we've been watching is just this extraordinary growth phenomenon. So that's a very real thing. That's not going to stop anytime soon. That's just going to continue to shake and move the world. So do you think that that's part of it? Do you think that there are certain jackals watching these margins and watching the fact that you're beginning to enter into an arena which is arguably a direct threat against the establishment's intention to depopulate the world and to remedy people's health? On the other hand, they're going to need you just as much in order to survive the day.
And that's honestly, that's the key point. It's like, Sacha, when we spoke, like, was it 6-7 months ago, and you were talking about some of the people that that were part of, I'll say the club on that side, that have been using stuff as well, because like she's mentioning, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what side you're on, we want longevity. But there's been some tremendous articles that have come out over the last month or so that billionaires, all they're searching for is longevity, right? And it's not even anti-aging. It's like, okay, they want to live forever because they know they keep compounding their wealth, which compounds their power.
Right.
And they keep playing that game.
This is true. This was a huge discussion, by the way, about how long they can live and how long can you bioprint everything. So could you live to be 160, 250 years old? This was a major, he's right. That was a major discussion.
Right.
And, the interesting part is, what we were talking to a new colleague that we met a couple months ago, and she's been going to Davos for years because she owns a bank, Swiss bank, and she's worth umpteen billions of dollars. And when we were asking her about going, she's like, look, you have to understand. She said, you go for the business networking. Not all the people there are like these idiots that talk about what they want to do. And and that's very true.
Yeah.
But bringing the light to the darkness. But there's a very large contingency, because there was a great article I was reading on Zero Hedge that was talking about how Davos is basically an echo chamber, right? It's the only place that you'll really hear it, because saying these things in the general public is asinine, right? Someone's just going to drag you out and bludgeon you. But only in this environment can you hear these people going, oh yeah, we agree, we need to knock out 40% of the population. Right. You go to your local bar and say, we need to kill off 40% of the people. Everybody in the bar goes, wait a minute, that means us.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to get along real quick. Let's take this outside and discuss this. And it's interesting, because the retort to all of this just so happens to be us engaging in our advancement, right? So whether you look at it from a health standpoint, like the Reawaken tour was just here in Nashville over the weekend. So we held a private event for a bunch of people, And what was interesting is there wasn't many people on the Reawaken tour that were awake. And I know you.
I mean, Sasha, I wish you could have been there. Like I know you're like we are. You travel a lot, so you know you're tired. I came home. I really want to see my children. I have 4 kids. I say this all the time. I mean, the 2 of them are older, but still, I want to see my family. And I go to an event, which you know how this is. So I haven't switched over. It's like 5 a.m. where I'm from. I haven't slept, and just some of the people and the comments. I wish somehow we could help these people understand that if we just sit in this bubble and we never ever talk about things and look at things and question things, which is one of the things I love about your show. I feel like you bring in different people and they talk about different things. I love it about your project because I think you're looking at all sides of things. And I do, of course, everyone understands your platform, and I hope everyone understands mine, right? I've never deviated, but it's interesting, just the people that you would think would be understanding and on our side. It's like they're so, I even think people are mad, like, why was I invited? And I will say another thing. I think another reason I was invited that no one's talking about and that I didn't accept until it hit me when I was there. One of my PhDs is in strategic science and military science. So in the year 2000, I started writing about biological warfare, psychological warfare through biological warfare, and how they would attack our population through first viruses, bacteria. My main concern was fungus. It always has been. And I've talked about that for years, for about 20 years. It's still my major concern, fungus and parasites. But then I wrote about how we would go from that transition to peacetime. So I probably have about 1,000 pages of that from school, and I'm getting ready to put the book out. I didn't want to put the book out. I started thinking about this. Why didn't I ever do anything with that? And it's because I was worried. But now I realize because of the questions I was being asked, they already know anyway.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And it didn't hit me because I was like you. And even with Clayton, I said, I don't understand why I'm invited, like why I'm invited to all these things. And then it hit me. And so I think there were multi reasons. Now, if you ask me, did you know in the year 2000, Christina, at this point, Sasha, you know me, you know, I knew different things. I didn't know why I knew them, and I wrote about them. So
I'll bring up 2 points you brought up with me. You met with one doctor who's one of the most prominent in sports performance. Mm-hmm. And when he met you, what did he say?
Yeah, in Germany.
What did
he
tell
was
you?
the doctor for the football team, the soccer team there, 40 years. He's Stephen Roche's doctor, who's the Triple Crown winner, and Stephen's a friend of ours. Right. He said he was destined to meet me, that it was a destiny for Stephen to work with me, that this had been planned for
and you were the future of healthcare.
Well, I don't want to brag. He just
no, we can do the bragging for you, darling, because the millions of people around the world that are seriously resurrecting health and wellness is staggering. I mean, as I said, I'm getting kind of tired of it. The root phenomenon is just this ludicrous kind of hybrid kind of ecology that's just like also eclipsing so much of my life because the feedback is so positive. It's constant messages and thanks and messages from people from around the world thanking me for introducing them. I know that you've got some new root brands products, and I should know about this stuff, but I don't, because I'm just catching up with you guys here. So could you kindly just let me know what's new on the table?
Yeah. So we launched, I'm trying to think of since we last talked.
I heard about the coffee and I can't wait to try this. I've heard it's amazing.
It comes out and we already did a soft launch, and now we're finalizing it to come out to everyone in March. And then we have a toothpaste. So just so you know, this is very interesting. So my platform, since I was in my late 20s, I've talked about fungus and parasites and done tons of research on that. And then I think you heard me talk about the fact that we know now when people have Alzheimer's and cognitive functioning issues, it's like fungus and parasites breeding in the brain. It comes through the gums. So there's a toothpaste coming out in March,
right,
that gets rid of it in the gums. And it's interesting. We just saw a show. What did we watch that night?
The new series, The Last of Us, that just came out.
And it starts with the doctor.
The whole thing is about
that. They're saying, okay, so what do you think about this virus and the pandemic? And the guy says, oh, I'm not worried about that. We'll always be able to fight viruses. We'll always be able to fight bacteria. it's the fungus, because the fungus is what changes your brain
Oh,
and
yeah.
makes you into a zombie. And he goes into it, and Clay looked at me and he goes, "Oh my gosh, Christina." I go, "I can't believe they're actually rolling
Here's
that
your
out."
disclosure.
But-
They had to show it.
Yes.
So we
Yes,
really
right.
focused on that for the kids' toothpaste, and then the other toothpaste. I also did a shampoo and a conditioner that does the same thing, that protects against the fungus and the parasites and detoxes and everything. That comes out, I think, in March. Ella Pure. So I did a skincare line that detoxes the skin, and it helps the skin as far as elasticity and wrinkles. But the thing that I'm most excited about is the skin coating. It's called Environ Skin Coating. And so I used a combination of hypochloric acid, iodine, zeolites, benzenites, a lot of different things that I know are protective of the skin in case of radioactivity, which is interesting. That was another discussion. Of course, if you ask me, how long ago did you develop that? Well, 2014 was when I developed it, but that's a hot topic. Like if you look now at the radiation we're being exposed to, it's just disintegrating. And this was another interesting thing that happened at Davos. There was a lady that was from NATO. I think we have a call with her tomorrow. You would love this. I would love to set up a call with you, Sacha, because she was so interesting. And we did a couple of talks together. And she said, "Christina, you know that all of this, the 5G and the radioactive activity and everything that's going on, is actually activating things in the brain that are causing people to have nervous breakdowns, schizophrenia, bipolar disorders, and actually disintegrating and even activating, cancer and different things." And I said, "Absolutely, I know." And then she asked me, "Do you think that if you don't get the vaccine, do you think it's still affecting you?" I said, 100%. It's just everywhere around us now. Every time I get on a plane, Sacha, I'm very thankful for our products. Like the one that I'm the most thankful for is Clean Slate, because I drink it when I get sick and it really helps me. But then the Mitochondria Defense Shield also is helping people tremendously. And that's one of the new products as well. And I think the clothing line and the Environ spray that we will launch on Fashion Week on Runway 7. And this is interesting. So another interesting thing, Sacha, and I'm being completely upfront with you. If you said to me, "Christina, do you think you'll ever do a fashion brand and do something with Burberry or on Runway 7? I'd be like, "No, why would I do that?" But I was approached to do it. And so we're doing that with Consuela Vanderbilt and some other things. That will be an
Interesting off-camera conversations to have on that.
We're not doing that here. So we have had many, many conversations and many things happen. You can't make this stuff up. Do you know what I mean? Like, Sacha, if you said to me, "Christina, who are you friends with now that you weren't before?" I would say, "No one." Like I'm becoming extremely
your discernment is quite high.
I'm becoming extremely protective of me, of just preserving my ability to make the right decisions and not be influenced by outside factors. But I want to tell you this personally. I want to tell you thank you, because when I first met you, I had a lot of questions, and some of my questions were about why was he at the UN? Why was he doing this? And then, of course, we heard all these different people that would say, because you were on their side, right? And I want you to know, I said to Clayton, I don't think he's on their side, but all these people are saying this, and now they're saying that about me.
Yeah, right.
And the thing is, I haven't changed a bit. In fact, I'm stronger. I have more discernment. But I can't just not do different things to help the world. I just can't do it.
People asking if you were cloned.
Oh yeah, now people, that's the whole thing. People are asking if I'm cloned. They said that I went there, Sacha, and that they did it. And they're asking me, how do I know I'm not cloned? And I've explained to people, the one thing you guys need to understand is you can't clone a spirit or a heart.
And
you can't do that. You can't do that because you can't make someone kind or loving or good. And I think they could just look in my eyes and they would know that I'm not a clone.
But there's also one little secret with cloning, that they can clone the body, but the little intricacies that make it special, like birthmarks and such, those aren't part of the process. I know she's the original.
Clayton's just trying to make
I wouldn't mind a copy though.
No.
So just drawing you back to products again, because how many products are there now within the root brands umbrella?
10 now.
We've got 11 that we'll have by
Can you
then
just run through them from
Okay.
the Genesis product?
And I do also, just so you know, Sasha, we launched the animal and the environment brand, but you can run through them and I'll add it.
So we have the foundations. You have the Trinity. So clean slate, zero in, and restore.
Which is very important in my opinion, those three.
And as she's hit on, every product of the 7 I'm going to go over and topically are all antifungal in their own capacities. And when combined together, which is really the key, they really do what they're capable of doing. So you have clean slate, zero in, and restore. Clean slate outsells everything 6-1.
I figured that's the one that I never ever leave the house without.
That's how I am, Sasha. I never, like, let's say there was an event that happened that we were all scared of. Let me give you an example. I was in Davos. Unfortunately, I brought 1 bottle. I was so sick. I drank half the bottle and I felt much better. The only problem was I drank half the bottle. And then I was like, I need like 3 more bottles, which isn't typical. But if you're really sick or something happens, that's the product too, I have to say, because there's a lot of people that have cancer. There's a lot of people that have a lot of issues. That one product, if people could, I can't make claims ever, but if they would take a lot of that product, that's extremely helpful. The problem is when you start taking a lot, you don't feel great.
Because of the process. But your audience will understand this, because the secret behind clean slate is not just the detoxification benefit. Right, because what she's been able to do is take this crystal and for the first time actually frack it and not destroy.
But when you say fracking, people think something negative, so I have to be careful.
Fracture, break apart. Yeah, we're not drilling for oil.
No, we're not doing coal mines.
So the special, you could say, the secret is actually what it's primarily made of, and our planet and our bodies being the same thing. We're 70% seawater, so the planet 70% with seawater.
Yeah.
So the trace minerals from sea salt are there. But the key happens to be the bioavailable silica. And that's why when you look at the bottle of clean slate, it says silicon dioxide, because that's how we have to label it, because there's no way to explain the level of quantum physics and bioscience engineering she's gone through to take a sodium aluminosilicate, break it apart, and release the orthosilicic acid that is actually held by that structure. And we're 17% silica and 70% water. It's the silica that's the key building block. It's the silica that remineralizes. It's the silica that crystallizes what we are.
Yeah. It's the silica.
Right? Your pineal gland is loaded with little crystalline oscillators that resonate with light. So at the same time you're decalcifying it, you're also feeding it to strengthen it, to allow it to become more resonant.
Yeah.
But the rest of your body. So you take those 3 and zero in. If people haven't taken it yet, I mean, you've got to get your hands on this stuff, because what we're seeing of all aspects of
this
health
goes
and
back to neurotransmission in the brain
it's
too.
It's all about neurotransmission.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you have those 3. Then Relive Greens is
Tilly.
Oh, here comes the superstar. Come here. Yes.
So Relive Greens is the other one that is really important to me, because it restores the Trinity though, Clay.
Well, it restores the
third. Tilly, sit down.
Here, sit.
And this brings me to another thing. We did a pre-launch, Sasha, during Christmas, of clean spirits. That's for alcohol detox, but also for basically clearing your spirit, right? And it's very interesting. Meredith, 1 second, babe. I'll be right back.
So I'll talk on this. So she took the foundation of what clean slate is, and then added a couple pieces that will specifically work on detoxifying the liver. And the feedback she was getting from a lot of our German contingency was like, look, we can't wait for this to officially launch, because it's cleaning our spirit, not just liver detoxification from alcohol and such. But they're seeing a completely different aspect. And we actually saw that with zero in as well. But
is another sublingual formula?
Yeah. Same,
like
same
clean slate?
Yeah. So you can think of it like a sibling to clean slate, that you could use them side by side. And like if you wanted to use clean slate during the day and use clean spirits at night, you know, as
Okay.
an extra liver flush.
Right.
But
I like that. Okay,
um,
good. I'm going to get some of that in.
the results have been really, really interesting thus far.
And there's a good
Um,
cream and moisturizer you've put out.
Oh yes. Well, in the well, so we launched the Ella Pure brand, which is named after our daughter, who was
She was
just
just
yelling
yelling at us.
So
She's mad because the car's not parked right, but yeah.
I have to move the car.
Yeah.
But the three products in Ella Pure, one the pucker plumper. So she created an all natural topical for your lips to get rid of the wrinkles around your lips and moisturize and actually plump up your lips. And yes,
a lot of people get wrinkles, and so I was trying to do
But-
something natural that they wouldn't get wrinkles.
But you can use it around your eyes and everything on other wrinkles as well, and it works on those just as
Really?
much. But it tastes really good on your lips.
Yay.
And then the tea mist.
I did a detox tea mist that detoxes the pores and then closes the pores, and it's phenomenal. It gets rid of people
So
that have acne. It gets
all
rid
of
of
your
Yeah.
you just squirt a couple times on your face, or if you're like our 18-year-old son who figured out it gets rid of his acne, go through a bottle a day.
Terrific.
He's like, oh, 2 is good. 2 every 30 minutes is even better. He's like, I need more of these. I'm like, well, I guess that's a good outcome.
This is
but
a
here's
true
the
story. He
worst.
went on a trip with his school, and he goes, "Mom, I need 8 bottles to take on this trip." It was like a 3-night trip, 4-night trip. I go, "Carter, he goes, I'm giving them away to all my friends." I go, we can't give
It's like,
them
no,
away.
you have to sell those.
But no, he loves it. The kids like that.
Like,
Yeah, I
all
love
of your
it.
pores, all the pores and the blackheads and stuff you get gone.
It makes your face
Wow.
look younger too. It really does. Like it makes it look like you've just had a spa treatment. It's really neat. But
All right, game on. I'm going to get it.
the Reno though is the best. I used a phytoplankton that's only available at one place in the world, and it takes forever to get it. And then it actually has some patented materials in it, as well as we've been able to have clinical claims. So it has anywhere from 70 to almost 80% decrease in wrinkles, improvement in collagen, and the elasticity of the skin. So it's phenomenal. It really is. I love it. It's just phenomenal.
So when you combine the skincare and you add in like Relive Greens or Natural Barrier Support, which is the vitamin D, C,
And give me back my youth.
and zinc, and then I was going to hit on Give Me Back My Youth, because Give Me Back My Youth is an absolute.
See, Sacha does know it.
Oh no, he knows. And the big buzzword as we get into 2023, probably towards the middle to the end of this year, the big conversation in the supplement world is going to be colostrum. Right. It was ashwagandha and stuff last year. Colostrum is going to be the topic, because we're in the collagen craze again, which was the same thing 30 years ago.
But we have the only one that animals go through a program where there's no GMOs, no wheat, there's nothing that
That's
they
right.
eat. And it's all, they're treated, it's a cruelty-free program. I think we're the only one that's cruelty-free.
With collagen, so bovine-derived collagen and bovine colostrum, and the only product that's actually proven and registered as cruelty-free.
Yeah.
And I actually did a process to try to take the lactose out to clean it, so that when people take it that have lactose intolerance like me, you would be able to take it. And then I made one for animals as well, because one of the things people don't know is they need that as well. So in the animal line that's launching in 2 weeks, they have the Clean Pets, which helps clean the pets. And then they have a coating for their skin that protects their skin and hair, for their fur. And then they have the grains, which is different than the Relive grains, but it is a grain specifically made for animals. And they have the Defense Shield to help, because the Defense Shield, which was called mitochondrial defense and now is defense, it's for NAD, and it's stabilized up to 2 years for NAD and quercetin and vitamin K. And I wanted animals to be able to have that as well.
So why is that important when we talk about NAD? And so NAD is
it's DNA. It's also a DNA. So NAD is also protects your chromosomes and your DNA. And of course, we all know that's a hot topic right now, and it's a true topic.
Yeah.
We've got to protect who we are. And it's kind of funny when people were asking me, how do I know that they weren't going to imprint upon my DNA when I went into Davos? I said, well, I'm taking the mitochondrial defense shield.
Good
And
luck
also,
on that one.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
Look, kids, thank you. This is perfect. I mean, this is quarter of an hour longer than I was expecting, but I'm delighted, because I did want to get a recap on where we're at. And, Christine, I have to say, just thank you for taking your sort of 300 PhDs and applying them to just addressing these, which one could almost say mundane areas of life, like this basic human health, basic skin, basic immune support. And you've really done it. And it's just fantastic that we've got now just a handful of powders and sublingual formulas that can resurrect us from the kingdom of the devil. I've been saying for the last few short years that there is nothing more important for us to focus on than resurrecting ourselves and our DNA from the kingdom of the devil, because anyone with any jot of consciousness knows that that's what this is all about. That's what's going down on planet Tara, on planet Earth at this time, at this epochal time, this axiomatic time in our sort of evolutionary upshift. We either live or die by this consciousness, this knowledge that forces, malevolent forces in this world, and not just the 3D temporal agents of darkness, but these egregore demonic forces that inform so much of the evil and the witchery of this world are there for a reason. This is a millennial old exchange and dialectic of demonic forces seeking to move into the human field, into our resonance, in order to usurp, in order to soul suck, and to take human plasma life force as a utility. So our capacity to address that, to apprehend that, to lay claim to the integrity of our DNA, our resonance, our immune system, our human health, our minds, bodies, and souls is everything. And I genuinely regard you as being the seminal figure in health science and medical science, who has one way or the other been standing stalwart on that frontier. So I love you for it, and I thank you for it, and so does my audience.
Well, I love you and I thank you. And I have to tell you, Sacha, I have more and more respect for you every day. And I mean that. I am thankful that I know you. And I feel like there's not a lot of people that actually understand me. And that sometimes makes me feel lonely. And I feel like you do. So I want to tell you thank you, because I have very pure motives, and that's it. Yeah. There's nothing else. And I appreciate you understanding me and the mission. And I feel like we're on this together. So thank you so much.
Indeed. Thank you, Clayton, as well, for being.
I love you, brother.
For being the main man.
One other note, non sequitur, that we hadn't been able to discuss, but one of the last trips we made to Cyprus, we were having dinner with some business associates over there.
I want to come to Mexico.
We're going to be down there at the end of April, and we'll go down to Bacalar and visit.
Well, I really
Very good.
But we were talking with some of our colleagues at dinner, and one of the business partners is like, "Oh yeah, my wife is Russian." I said, "Really? What part of Russia?" And he looks at us. He said, "She's Tartarian."
Ah.
And I said, "Oh, whoa, wait a minute here." And we had fun talking for 15 minutes, and everybody at the table, like his partners who are our friends, were like, "Hold on, you know about Tartaria?" And I was like, "Oh yes, this is the lost tribe. They've hidden this." And it was really interesting to see them all open up. And she looked at me, she's like, "Wait a minute, you're not crazy?"
I didn't say that.
She's like, "Well, they know about this too?"
Well,
Anyway,
it's coming. It's surfacing. I'm telling you, I was just in the Gulf last week. I was meeting with a government delegation sent by a head of state of one of the biggest countries in Africa, who is expressly inviting me and the team I'm working with to come to that country to help to resurrect it from the globalist luciferic hand, but at the same time is offering to open up the basement for us about the Nubian pyramids that have been discovered out there, far bigger than the pyramids in Egypt and at least twice as old. The truth of the matter is that these arcane technologies are resurfacing, and they're all connected variously through the Tartarian mythos to Atlantis and Mu and what have you. But all of those arcane civilizations are being revisited now as we swing through the ecliptic of the galaxy, and we are hitting again the photonic light clouds that we left behind a long time ago, and they're reminding us because they contain the imprints that were left the last time we moved around in those cycles. The point being that ancient Tartaria is, I think, that the biggest aspect of corrected history that we're going to have to address head on. I'm doing a whole series of media on that and films on it this year. Anyone wanting to participate in this, please put them in touch with me.
Can't wait for that.
I would love to see that.
So one of us is the reincarnate from Atlantis and from some of our much more interstellar ancestors.
Indeed.
Sacha, you were like the first person that really had a lot of conversations with me. I've had a lot more. I hope to see you soon so I can tell you some stuff that I don't really want on camera, but in person. And I just want to thank you again. I do have to go down to my kids because they're pretty upset because I'm never.
All right. Love you, kids. And I'll be seeing you very soon. Much love to you. Thanks.
Much love.